Hey everyone, welcome to another Techstrong TV. Today's June 30th, last day of June. Hope you guys are having a great month, getting ready for summer. We have some interesting interviews today for Techstrong TV. Some of these interviews actually were conducted, some were streamed live, most of them were recorded at the recent RSA conference in San Francisco. And so you'll probably see a distinct cyber and security tone for today's show, and you may see it in the coming weeks as we have lots and lots of interviews that we did at RSA that we'll be playing over the next 2-3 weeks. And also, speaking of RSA, of course, we put on our DevSecOps event there every year. This year was the 7th year, and we will be replaying all of the sessions from this year's DevOps Connect DevSecOps. I believe it's on July 12th. You can get there, go to techstrongevents.com and just look up for the virtual DevOps Connect DevSecOps. Great speakers. The Executive Director, Jim Zemlin of the Linux Foundation, Executive Director of Cloud Native Computing Foundation, Priyanka Sharma. We also have Chen-Si Wang, Carolyn Wong, John Willis, an amazing panel from MITRE and NIST and Intel and the U.S. Senate on compliance around software supply chain security. Just so much more. Jennifer Kapowski from Target. A ton of great speakers. Check that out on techstrongevents.com. It is July 12th. It's free. You can register now. What do we have in store for today, though? Well, first of all, we have a conversation I had with Casey Bisson. Casey is the head of product and developer relations at Blue Bracket. Again, I did this recorded this conversation with Casey at RSA. And Blue Bracket, again, software supply chain security has become huge. Blue Bracket is an application that allows you to look into what's in the code, who has access to it, where it's going. And it's really, because it at the end of the day, it's about the code, right? It's about the quality of the code. So good stuff there from Blue Bracket. After that is another interview I did at RSA, and this is with Eric Skinner. Eric's the VP of Market Strategy at Trend Micro. Of course, Trend Micro has been around for a long time. A lot of people know them as endpoint security. But they really have a great cloud product, and now they've put it all together into Trend Micro One. It's a unified cybersecurity platform that pulls together all the disparate pieces of that Trend Micro product universe. And it really is. I mean, I think this is kind of the future of security as we look at a 360-degree kind of approach to it, incorporating the latest technologies like Zero Trust and so forth. After that, we're going to go to something old, and again, we're going to go back to the SNCC Know Your Code Open Source and Supply Chain Summit that we recently hosted. And in today's Something Old, we actually have Micah Silverman, who's the Director of Developer Acceleration at SNCC, and he's going to do a live Log4 shell hack, hands-on actionable fix guide. It seems like it happened a few months ago and it's in the rearview mirror, but there's still a lot of Log4j and Log4 shell stuff out there. This is a great session from Micah. I think you'll enjoy it. After that, we've got 2 interviews from Charlene O'Hanlon. First, Char interviews Paul Duffy, Solutions Architecture Lead for North America Startups at AWS. And this is all about their AWS Clean Energy Accelerator. A lot of companies, jumping on that right now. I actually have a good news story we're going to cover in the news around green and energy and so forth. But AWS is pitching in to help here, and they're funding some companies with innovative ideas, and Charlene has more on it. Then Charlene speaks with Tony Lee, who's the Chief Technology Officer for Hyperscience, and this is about human-centered automation. Good conversation there with Charlene and Tony. I recommend it. After that, Mitchell is over in the analyst corner. Mitchell has 3 interviews we're playing today. 2 of them I'll mention are from RSA, just this month. We have Ron Perez, who's an Intel fellow and chief security architect. So this is, one of the top security folks at Intel. Great conversation with Ron. You can watch that with Mitchell. Then Mitchell also has my friend PJ Keimer, who's CTO, co-founder at Illumio. If you're not familiar with Illumio segmentation and so forth, good conversation there with Mitchell. And then we have Mitchell had big names today, huh? Tarun Chopra, who's the VP for IBM to Hybrid Cloud. He's with IBM Z Cloud and Swazi as a service. A good conversation with Mitchell and Tarun. Check it out. And then that'll do it for today. I had good amount of interviews, nice mix. Enjoy the day. We'll see you with fresh content next Monday. But here's today's show. All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Techstrong TV News. In this format, we're trying to give you some headlines and stories from around the web, as well as focusing in a little bit on what we have on our own Techstrong sites. So let's jump into it today. Article coming out of Axios, and it's around that. When law enforcement authorities demand personal data, tech companies have little to stand on, legally speaking, and they, and almost always have to turn that data over. This has become now especially acute as a result of the recent Supreme Court Roe v. Wade decision. Many people are concerned that authorities in states where abortion is going to be illegal will use data from period tracking apps and other personal data apps to gather evidence of women who went for an abortion. And though tech firms have overwhelmingly come out against this Roe v. Wade overturn, legally speaking, they may not have any alternative but to turn over this information. And it's bad. There's another story I'm going to catch at the end of this. I think the only thing that can help here is some sort of federal or law, government action to protect privacy rights again. We need to strengthen that. Certainly in the EU with the GDPR, you wouldn't be able to do this. But here, right now, that's the state of things. So that bears watching. We're going to have more on that later in today's news. Several articles out today detailing layoffs, hiring freezes in tech. I don't think it's news to anyone out here, really. But we are certainly feeling and seeing a slowdown in tech job market, tech spending. I think it's affecting capital raises. Most of the raises that you're seeing announced really took place a couple months ago, and they're just being announced now. But, some of the tech companies who've announced layoffs, for instance, Tesla, 200 just the other day. Netflix coming off a really bad quarter. Coinbase, of course, with the carnage going on in the crypto markets. But Stitch Fix, Sonder, Microsoft, and even PayPal have laid off people. On top of this, hiring freezes from Intel, Meta, Facebook, Twitter. We've seen it in our own world here at Techstrong with Capado and Cybereason, Lacework, others. More evidence. Alibaba, the giant Chinese commerce cloud provider, just closed their Israeli R&D center. So it wasn't a big R&D center. I don't want to mislead anyone. But, I mean, just the evidence continues to mount that we are in a bit of a slowdown here. We've seen these cycles before, though, and here's the good news. What goes down comes up. What comes up goes down. And we will weather this as well. That's why it's Techstrong. Here's a feel-good story, though. Swiss startup Climeworks AG is setting up its second large-scale direct air capture plant. That's a DAC plant. And it'll be built in Iceland and be operational within about 24 months. So this is a plant, huge fans and so forth, that literally sucks air in, removes the CO2 from the air, right, greenhouse gas, and then in a process that they've developed, they mix the CO2 with water and inject it underground, where through some chemical processes it becomes rock. They're using Icelandic geothermal energy to power this plant, which is pretty cool when you think about it. And it is scheduled or estimated that it'll remove 36,000 tons of CO2 a year and bury it in the ground as rocks. That's an amazing technology, an amazing story. Not to bum anyone out, but 36,000 tons is a small fraction, sliver of the 36, I think it's billion tons that we put in CO2 into our atmosphere every year. But it's a start, and with these kind of plans going up, it may represent our best way of meeting climate goals and removing CO2 from the air. So I applaud the folks at Climeworks. I can't wait to see more technologies like this. Next news story. So, for those who remember, TikTok had a Chinese problem about a year and a half ago. And the story was that Oracle or another U.S. tech company were going to invest or outright buy TikTok. And the government, along with the changing administrations, it seemed that, the heat was off TikTok. Well, this week, FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr wrote to both Apple and Google requesting that the companies remove TikTok from their app stores for its patent of surreptitious data practices. I had a tough time with that word. And this comes after a BuzzFeed News report last week that the TikTok staff in China had access to the U.S.-based users' data up until January. So is this a knee-jerk reaction to that? Or are there other data practices going on here? I'm not sure. But it certainly seems like the U.S. has decided that TikTok needs to be taken off of these mainstream app stores. So we'll see what happens. I think there's too many TikTok users out there to stop it, but we shall see. Also, I wanted to mention that there is a bill pending in the U.S. House of Representatives that just cleared committees with overwhelmingly bipartisan support. We don't see that too much in Congress today. That will enact a privacy statute. Could be the U.S. version of the GDPR. So to our earlier article about tech companies handing over data, this may be the saving grace for people's privacy from, Big Brother, government, abortion information, etc. Now, still a long way to go on this bill. It's out of committee. It has to be passed by the House and, of course, by the Senate and signed by the President. But certainly, I mean, one good thing that may come out of Roe or overturning Roe v. Wade is that we finally decide that we need to do something about individuals' privacies here in the States. Anyway, that's the news for today. We're going to get on with the rest of our show here. Enjoy Techstrong TV. We'll be back.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, we're back here live in the RSA conference with Moscone West on what they call Broadcast Alley. Our next guest, I'm really happy to introduce you to Casey Bison. Casey's with Blue Bracket. Hey Casey, welcome.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure to have you here. So Casey, in talking a little bit off camera, you mentioned this is your first RSA conference.
It is, absolutely. I come from the cloud world. You know, I was part of the container revolution. Before that, I was engineering, building things at scale, went to containers because that's where that was a way where I learned how to scale things and deliver what we needed to do, and certainly deliver things, applications at scale. And what I saw was this really great diversity of pathways from developer to delivery. And that's what led me to security and here at my first RSA conference.
Excellent. I want to dig into that, but before we do, you're with Blue Bracket, as I mentioned. Yeah. Why don't we give folks at home, maybe I'm sure a lot of them may not be familiar with Blue Bracket.
Right.
So talk to us. What's Blue Bracket about?
So Blue Bracket solves the other half of your code security problem. Most people are thinking about what the code does. You know, maybe it's a SQL injection sort of vulnerability, the sorts of things that you can find with SAST and DAST tools. But as a category, that represents about half the risk. Half the risk that you'll see in code. The other half of the risk in code, the other half of that risk is the secrets, the passwords, the keys that are in the code, the intelligence about what the code connects to that attackers are using to expand their attacks and move so quickly that we've seen over the past year. As a category, that's the other half. And when you follow that path, you look at who has access and what and how those code hosts are configured and your entire CI/CD chain is configured. Yep. And so what Blue Bracket does is we help you find out what's in your code, who has access, and where it's going.
Excellent, man. Good stuff. So, Casey, look, you're at the right place because besides Zone Security Boulevard, we're DevOps.com and we're Container Journal. So when it comes to cloud native and the whole CI/CD thing, this is our audience. Those are our people. What's interesting and now I'm a little opposite of you. I've been in security for 25 years plus. And the whole reason I got into DevOps and then cloud native was because I thought this was the best thing that could happen to security. That we were finally going to be able to, as it's now called, shift left, move that security into the development process, not waiting till after we deploy to find out what was vulnerable or what was, not what dependencies we had, stuff like that. And it's taken, I'm doing this 7-8 years here at DevOps.com. It's taken that long, but now it's kind of commonplace where a guy like you comes up here and you're talking about, right? Hey, man, we're going to move security into that developer. It wasn't always a given.
No.
Right?
No. Yeah, so I obviously come from my background in cloud. It is, however, amazing as I'm here, and I think this is one of the largest global conferences for security ever. But
it is.
Everybody here, there's 1,000 to 10,000 developers back at their enterprises that outnumber every security person,
and will for the next
overwhelmingly
foreseeable future.
And so, if we look at security in an adversarial relationship with the developers, we know
you're a loser.
Yeah,
that's the whole point. Why I did DevOps.com. Mm-hmm. We had to lose that adversary. Here's a lesson I learned, right? I've never met a developer who raised their hand and said, I don't care about developing crappy code, or I don't mind insecure code. I just want to get it done. Everybody has a pride in what they do. They want to develop good code.
Exactly.
Right?
But when you put developers in a situation where they have to turn business requirements into a product, they're going to have to optimize, and they're really good at self-optimizing for
Absolutely.
what those requirements are.
Well, there's a caveat that I've learned over the last 8 years. You can't expect them to optimize what they don't understand. And for many of them, security is just gibberish. No.
I will say this. When we talk about security in terms of abstract things that don't matter to them, yes, absolutely. When you talk about some of these risks that are really at the edge, there are a lot of developers who are like, come on, let's do the math, let's do this, approach this as engineers, and recognize that threat model is real, but it's not worth the cost to develop against. Those are some things that developers have to do because, again, they're responsible for turning business goals into sellable products, and they have to bring some reality to the security perspective. So if, from the security perspective, we think this is a real and serious and viable threat model, we've got to find a way to make sure that's clear and walk that through. I know I've been lucky enough to meet two kinds of CISOs in my experience. There's the CISO who identifies the problems, they identify the solutions, maybe they involve some developers to evaluate potential vendors, and then they go by. And as a vendor, every vendor loves that CISO. But then there's the CISO who works with the developers, they do the tabletop exercises, and the developers understand that threat. They understand how that threat can be a risk to them, and they game out the scenarios in which they're going to respond to it. And so those developers at that point, they're the ones who are identifying how to fix it, and they're the ones who are identifying the vendors and the solutions and doing all that evaluation. And security vendors will never speak to those CISOs because they don't have the developers are solving those problems and may not be talking to security vendors.
So I'm going to disagree and agree.
Go for it.
I think there are a lot of companies, a lot of security vendors that don't understand that dynamic. The smarter and better ones, more successful ones, are understanding that dynamic, and their valuations show it. Here's the other interesting thing. You could have security, quote unquote, security vendors making solutions for developers to develop more secure code or better secure code. And the developers buy into it. It's a good tool for them.
Mm-hmm.
But generally speaking, the developer he needs the security team's approval to use that tool. Is that an approved security tool for the developer, number one? And number two, and probably more important, is who's paying for it?
Yeah.
Right? Where budget comes from.
That is a huge transformation that we've seen. If you go back to the start of the cloud revolution, let's say 2010, right? And this is the time.
For me, it was 2005, but
you're right. You know what? I named 2010 because in a lot of ways, that moment when we saw 100 million user cloud apps, cloud-born apps with 3 developers bringing applications to 100 million users, that's when people realized if we don't pay attention to cloud, we lose, right? Mm-hmm. And it's also when you see, so enterprises move to the cloud, they not only adopted cloud, they adopted code workflows, CI/CD workflows that really are that DevOps transformation. So the future is already here, not evenly distributed. So absolutely, DevOps has been around forever. There have been organizations that have been doing it well. Now it's in that place where it is irreversible. And we can definitely see that. And part of this is that people are understanding that developers need tools, and some of those tools cost money. In the same category here, I think there's a real, we need to pay attention to what quality code is. Yeah. Because it's very, very hard for people to measure quality code, but developers want to develop quality code, and every developer takes pride in their work. I know that developers want to have reasonable work hours and they want to be able to go home, but they take pride in the work they do. And so one of the proxies, and it's a really imperfect measure, but one of the proxies for quality code is test coverage. Yeah. And so we see developer teams are increasingly paying for services that measure and report test coverage. And one of the reasons for this is it helps them push back against their business leadership. It helps them structure their time so that when business leadership says, we got to deliver these things on the schedule, they can say, well, we also have to meet these quality requirements. And that proxy, imperfect as it is in terms of test coverage, is really good because it gives developers this opportunity to push back on the business side, but it also gives those developers to have an opportunity to have conversations with each other about what quality is. Mm-hmm. And we find that when we approach security the same way,
Yeah.
When we give developers those metrics, and we give them that automatic reviews in their pull requests, it puts those developers in a better position to discuss what security is. Get the easy stuff out of the way first. Nobody wants a pull request review that's all about style, because those are bad reviews. Mm-hmm. But when you do some of these things automatically, give that feedback so that nobody has to face the other person about that. That positions everybody to have a better conversation about security. The architecture. Is the architecture of the code the right architecture to solve the problem securely?
So personally, I call that making security synonymous with quality.
Yeah.
Right? It shouldn't. Quality means it's secure.
Mm-hmm.
It can't be quality if it's not secure, number one. Number two, I think what you outlined there too is also a big part of kind of the SRE thing, which is, moving away from SLAs to SLOs,
mm-hmm.
right? And working with the developers on those SLOs so that they understand what constitutes quality, what's acceptable quality, what's high quality. I will tell you, as I sit here, right? And I've been in the IT game 30 years, security 25 years. The biggest change, one of the biggest, I've seen a lot of changes, but one of the biggest changes I've seen is in testing. Mm-hmm. It used to be when when you were doing your roadmap, right, your 6-month release cycle, it used to suck because we developed for, let's say, a month and a half. Then we'd have to have a month and a half of testing because it was that hard. Mm-hmm. Then we'd fix what the testing found and then do testing again. And generally, in your 6-month cycle, that didn't leave a lot of time for that second round of testing. So that used to get compromised. And we'd say, okay, what's the minimum amount of testing we could do? Because we got a release date to hit. Mm-hmm. The advent of CI/CD, of continuous, the advent of automated testing, right? GitOps, some of the other things we're seeing now. Game changer. Mm-hmm. Game changer, right? Testing is no longer the Cinderella of the stepsisters, right? It gets done. And more we're seeing security being as part of that test suite, as part of the testing process.
I'm going to take it even further. So, as much as everything else you described, what you really described was this agile process, yep. right? That has driven the adoption of CI/CD.
Yep.
And we've seen, there's some really great research on the cloud side about how one of the strongest indicators for company growth is the rate of release. Mm-hmm. Companies that are releasing faster are growing. Yeah, exactly. Stats. DORA metrics. Mm-hmm. And so over 10 years of research on this stuff, we've seen rate of release is correlated in a causal relationship to growth.
Yep.
And so the question that from a security side we have to answer is, how do we integrate with that? And the only way to do that is not to shift left to the developer and say, now the developer has to do this and this. No, we have to shift left all the way to the business side and set business requirements in the
that sets the tone. Absolutely. Yeah. Hey man, this is a great conversation. I hope I didn't go too far from what you were looking for, but no. It was a good chat.
Pleasure, yeah.
Hey, where can people get information on Blue Bracket?
BlueBracket.com. Join us online, read about what we do, but most importantly, sign up for a free account. Protect your code now.
Excellent. Absolutely. BlueBracket.com. We're here live at RSA conference on Broadcast Alley. I was going to say Digital Alley, but we'll be right back with some more. We're here. It's Wednesday, RSA week. Stay tuned.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, we're back here live at RSA conference, coming at you, streaming to Europe and Asia and South America and Africa and the rest of the U.S. For those of you who can't be here at RSA, it's almost I would say it's as close a return to normalcy as I've seen.
Unexpected.
Yes,
Yeah.
unexpected's a good word for it. I've heard numbers of 20 to 25,000 people here, which is still, to be fair, almost half of what it was in 2019.
But it's really busy.
But it's a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot. I'm almost glad that we're in Moscone West, which is probably a little less crowded than North and
It
South.
is, yeah.
We're here in our broadcast studio because it gets crowded out there.
It's very crowded.
Yep.
Yeah.
Gentleman here who's going along with me agreeing is Eric Skinner, right? Eric's with Trend Micro. And welcome to Techstrong
Thanks.
TV, Eric.
It's a pleasure to chat with you.
Pleasure to have you here. So, Eric, I mean, let's continue this RSA thing.
Yeah.
You've been here before.
I have many times. Yeah.
What's your impression?
The energy level is still high. Cybersecurity continues to be a high priority. Luckily, during the pandemic, cybersecurity remains super important for companies.
Yeah.
And so we still see a lot of customers here, a lot of prospects here who are still facing big challenges and looking for solutions. It's there's high energy.
I think
And a lot of hype too.
Luckily for security
Yeah.
vendors, I don't know if the people out there are so lucky, right, that we've had the security issues we've had. With the pandemic, we've had almost, and it'd be a good book. I haven't seen a good book or article on this, but
Yeah.
security, pandemic-related security issues, right? It seems like, what's the poster child for security during the pandemic? Software supply chain?
Well,
Zero trust?
I mean, certainly the huge shift in where people are working created big visibility challenges.
Yes.
So some of the zero trust stuff has obviously kicked into high gear, but in general, IT security needing better awareness of what's going on because they can't just focus on the people in the office anymore. I mean, of course,
Absolutely.
even before people were traveling and everything, but suddenly tons of people are out of the building. So
It's work
visibility
from
becomes a big
anywhere.
problem.
It's work from anywhere.
Yeah.
So, Eric, and it's fueling, as we said, and so it's been a good time at RSA.
Yeah.
Let's talk Trend Micro, though,
Sure.
right? So, Trend Micro, look, if you're like me, you've been in security a while. Trend's one of the players, always has been, right?
Yeah.
And
30 years.
years and years. And originally, it was more. Back then it was AV and then endpoint security. But we've seen over the last few years, Trend is kind of a full-featured security platform, if you will, right? Cloud, endpoint, identity access, threat management, all of the network, all of the players. And it really, I guess you formalize that whole platform thing as Trend Micro One, right?
That's right. We pulled things together into something new that we call Trend Micro One, which is really a unified cybersecurity platform, pulling together the capabilities of the various components that Trend Micro has had, in some cases for a long time, in some cases for a more recent amount of time. And that really started with the initiatives around XDR a few years ago. We were one of the very first companies to embrace and innovate with XDR because we saw the value of connecting the dots between these platforms. The threats are moving faster. The attackers are moving faster. We see this in ransomware cases now where, instead of taking days or weeks, they're taking hours, minutes. So XDR's ability to detect threats that are moving in subtle ways across the organization. That was the first step of tying together our platform. And then we saw the potential to do even more.
But wait, there's more, right?
Yeah.
What's interesting as I sit here talking to you, thinking about it, Eric, is first of all, security today isn't what security was 25 years ago when I started, right?
No.
There was network security, there was endpoint security. Now, there's so many facets, attack surfaces, threat intel, threat response, cloud, DevSecOps. I mean, there's a lot of different elements to today. There's at best, a handful of companies who can pull all of these disparate parts together into one platform, if you will.
That's right.
Like a Gen Micro
Mhm.
1. Because it really means it's to get your arms around this.
Yeah, a lot of organizations are struggling, first of all, to keep up with the various detections and the various alerts that come up in
Every day.
platforms.
Yeah.
But we've also got this attacker behavior where they're working really hard to hide, and they're doing subtle things that don't necessarily trigger detections or alerts in the individual silos. And so one of the things that XDR brought to the table, and now we see XDR all over this trade show this year, is that XDR is looking for those subtle clues and correlating them across the environment, really taking what was a terrific solution in EDR and expanding EDR to cover a broader range of things, not just the endpoint.
Yep.
So XDR was that first step to really help organizations find the attackers in a way that the individual solutions were not able to do. And organizations have to do this faster because the attackers are moving faster.
No doubt.
Yeah.
The attackers move fast. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to say they're smarter, but they're certainly much better organized.
They're terrifically well funded, and they are organized, and they're actually specialized. We see attacker groups that focus on initial entry, and then each stage of the attack has groups of attackers that you can hire, and you can get
But
tech
they
support
work
from
together,
them.
right?
Exactly.
This group does this to do their thing, but then the byproduct they sell out the back door, right?
Yeah.
To the next group that works with that stuff. It's a whole ecosystem.
And it's a SaaS platform in a lot of cases, and they know that the faster they execute, the more likely they are to get the payoff.
The bigger the fish.
So they're hiding and they're moving fast, and it's up to security vendors like us and security teams in our customers to detect as rapidly as possible. And so the old ways don't work.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let's jump into this Gen Micro
The next
1.
part. Yeah. Okay. So we had the power of XDR already helping our customers, and we saw the ability that was bringing to our customers, and then layering on top of that managed detection and response, which is so critical for so many organizations. But we realized that there were still gaps in terms of customers' security coverage, their visibility. For example, we talked to our incident response teams, and I asked them, hey, where are these serious attacks originating? Not what country are they originating, but what is the first step in the attack? And they said, actually, it's pretty simple. 50% of the attacks start with phishing, and the other 50% start with unknown, unmanaged, or misconfigured internet-facing assets. And we said to ourselves, well, that's pretty interesting, because at the time when we were having these conversations 2 years ago, we didn't help customers identify those things. So what we've done is we've extended this platform, and we've built this Trend Micro 1 platform that not only does XDR, but does attack surface management. And we really break that up into 3 stages. First of all, discovering your attack surface. What do you have? And then secondly, assessing the risk to really understand, okay, well, where are the problems? And really synthesizing all the information that's available to us from our own stack, but also third-party integrations, to then help the customer with the third stage, which is mitigating the risk. You can't fix everything. So what are the 3 most important things you have to do today?
Yep.
Right? And the power of that is tremendous with respect to getting the customer to focus on the most important things.
Love it. Now, nothing in security is ever done.
No.
What's next?
Oh man, come on. We just shipped this thing 2 months ago.
Well, yeah, I know, but
I think that there's a ton of enrichment that still happens in this concept of attack surface risk management. The job is not done, right? So how can we improve discovery? How can we improve that risk assessment? There's a ton of customer interest in how we're doing this risk assessment and helping them understand how their security posture and the overall health of their environment is improving or decreasing over time, and why. What are we seeing there? And we're continuing to work with the thousands of preview customers who are using this platform on tuning that, helping them get the most value out of it. And then there's the automation capabilities that come with that remediation. And we're not going to say that everything is going to get automated. That's unrealistic. But there are certain things that can be automated, and we're taking bites out of that already, and we're going to continue to do more ourselves and with SOAR partner integrations.
That was a new word, SOAR. Let's talk about that.
Security orchestration automation.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah.
is SOAR part of the Trend Micro platform?
It's
or are you partnering with SOAR providers?
we have a diverse customer base. So we have small organizations and large organizations using the product. So one of the big transformations for Trend in the last year is we've really opened up interconnectedness with the ecosystem and recognizing, for example, that we can get a lot of visibility by plugging into partners like Tenable and Qualys or Active Directory or Okta, or a wave of different companies that are gradually getting integrated with. But also on the automation side, especially if you're a larger organization, you're probably already using a SOAR platform. So we are integrating with third-party platforms, and then we're providing some basic capabilities native to our own platform, so the smaller customers get some of that built-in functionality. And we're not telling them, oh, ours is better, because the reality is for those larger customers, those pure play SOAR products are going to be better for them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hey, Eric, this has been pretty dense information in here. We've packed a lot into a little bit of time. If you don't mind, we'll put Trend Micro 1 to the side a second.
Sure.
What else beyond one? I mean, Trend Micro is a many tentacled kind of thing now. What else do you see coming down?
Well, one of the interesting areas that you brought up already is Zero Trust, which is not a product per se from anybody, but it's a philosophy that's really important and growing in popularity for good reason. And so think of that as sort of a horizontal slice through things that Trend is doing. And in fact, the reason we built the risk assessment functionality in Trend Micro 1 started with Zero Trust projects at Trend, where we said, well, okay, a lot of these vendors that are doing Zero Trust today, they're really doing network plumbing. They're kind of like, okay, instead of wide open VPN, we're going to do point-to-point network connectivity, and we're going to do segmentation. And that's important. But one of the basic concepts of Zero Trust is that you need to continuously assess the health of devices and identities, because you're trying to decide whether to continue trusting them, right? The definition, never trust, always verify. So that always verify is a thing that we've noticed many vendors have skipped. And we've taken it incredibly to heart, this concept of continuous assessment. And so one of the things the Trend Micro 1 engine is able to do is provide really sophisticated assessment of identity health and device health. And that's going to power any kind of Zero Trust solution that the customers use. So we feel that Zero Trust is an important area. There's a lot of hype. There's a lot of confusion.
There's certainly a lot of hype this year at RSA about it.
Well, one of the things we saw is tons of vendors basically said, oh yeah, Zero Trust is important. Okay, everything we already built for the last 20 years, that's Zero Trust. And that's not really
But that's
helpful.
Typical of this industry,
It's not really
quite frankly.
helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's always some new buzzword that everyone gathers around. You know what we didn't tell people, though? They want to find out more about Trend Micro 1. Where are they going?
They're definitely going to trendmicro.com, and they will find it all there.
It's right on the front page.
Oh, yeah.
Cool, man.
Absolutely.
Hey, thanks for being with us here at
RSA
RSA this year. We're going to take a break. It's my pleasure. We are live, streaming live at from Moscone West, Broadcast Alley. What is it? It's about almost quarter after 10 here in the morning. We got a full day of broadcasting. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Micah Silverman, and I'm Director of DevSecOps Acceleration for Snyk. And if it's not obvious what that means, I accelerate developers' knowledge of security vulnerabilities and security issues in their code. And I run workshops just like these, and I run a team of people that run these workshops just like the one that we're going to do today. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the Log4Shell vulnerability that was discovered in early December. And we'll give some background and we'll do some live hacking. It'll be really hands-on, and there's a lot of good demos in it. Here's our agenda. We're going to look at what Log4Shell is. We're going to look at its makeup, because you might be as surprised as I was to discover that there's a pile of networking goodness, or badness as the case may be, in Log4j. We'll see the Log4Shell exploit in action. We'll talk a bunch about how you can remediate it, and we'll go into a deep dive with Log4Shell. And you can see the inner workings of it in the old version. And the spoiler alert here is that this networking stack that enabled this Log4Shell vulnerability in the latest version has now been removed. So the code that we're going to look at is no longer in the latest version of Log4Shell, but it's useful to know where we came from. And then I'll stick around for Q&A at the end. Quick overview, what is this all about? Well, it's a highly prevalent, critical, and easily exploitable zero-day vulnerability. What does all that mean? It means that it's the highest level of vulnerability, and it caused the world really to scramble, because Log4j, the logging framework, is in so much open source and closed source Java code all over the world. The remediation is to identify where you use Log4j 2 and upgrade it to the latest version, which is 2.17.1. That's the best way to remediate. But we have produced a full remediation guide, because you can't always just turn off your application, update a version, redeploy. That may not be feasible in the short term, so we have a number of stopgap measures that you can do in the interim, but ultimately that middle bullet point is the best way to make sure that you're not vulnerable to Log4Shell. So what is Log4j? If you're like me and you use a lot of open source frameworks and libraries with Java, you've encountered logging for sure, but you've probably set it and forgot it. I know I did. So I'm a Spring Boot developer a lot of the time, and there's logging built into Spring Boot, and I make use of logging, but I don't really think about what is the underlying framework that it's using. It turns out that Spring Boot uses by default SLF4j and logback. So if you are a Spring Boot developer and you didn't override defaults, you wouldn't have even been affected by Log4Shell. But as Java developers, we love our abstractions, and it's super easy to drop in any logging framework. And many people did drop in Log4j because it's kind of a beloved logging framework for a variety of reasons. And so Spring Boot developers and organizations were affected if they overrode the defaults. But the whole point is that it's fast and flexible, reliable application logging. And logging has gotten more complex over the years. Back in the old days, say 1995, 96, when I started programming in Java, and this is usually the point in my talk where I invite you to get off my lawn, but we had system.out.println, and all was right with the world. We could log things, we could debug. It was pretty easy. We saw everything in the console. But over time, we needed logging to be more sophisticated. Logging provides us value in two main ways. One is to log out error conditions, exceptions that happens. If something goes wrong in our application code, we want an entire history of how we got to that point, and logging provides that to us. And then the second is for usage. So we want to know how many people are logged in and what part of our application they're using and where things may be slowed down. We want to look at timing messages. All of that comes through in logging. And over time, the console just wasn't enough. So we added more functionality to these logging frameworks like Log4j. For instance, the ability to log to a database. With it, once logging information is in a database in a structured way, I can use queries to get information out of the database. Maybe I want to see all of the activity from 12 a.m. to 2 a.m. last night because that's when we had some sort of outage or some sort of issue. Further, we started using logging for remote services. So there's a lot of great cloud services out there. Sumo Logic and Datadog come to mind, where I can point my application at them and use a library, and now all of my logging goes to them. And then I can look at dashboards and roll-ups. So what started out as kind of a humble developer debugging process has grown into a much more important feature or backdrop of our applications, which is logging. And that's why this vulnerability was so widespread, because Log4j really is everywhere. Now, the Log4j vulnerability started out, as we said, it was reported on December 10th. Our own Brian Vermeer at Snyk, a Java champion, was the first on the block to post a blog post about the vulnerability and how to deal with it. And as a side note, he literally wrote this blog post while he was on his way out to vacation. So good for Brian for being right on top of this. But it really was the highest priority score that we'd ever given to a vulnerability, because it was so easy to expose or so easy to take advantage of, and because Log4j is so prevalent. Now, this is the OG vulnerability. Make sure that you upgrade to 2.17.1. That is the latest version of the fix. And if you may or may not know the kind of the trajectory of how this evolved, but the vulnerability was discovered in version 2.14.1. A fix was put in place for 2.15, then another release for 2.16, then another release for 2.17, and finally we landed on 2.17.1, and that one has stuck for a few months now. But it highlights kind of the double-edged sword of open source libraries. We have the ability in a community of developers, mainly volunteer developers, to react very quickly to vulnerabilities, but sometimes it takes a number of iterations to get it right, and that can be frustrating. If you work on a DevOps team and you're responsible for deploying production code, and you were involved in this whole Log4Shell kerfuffle, you had to release your production code about 4 or 5 times, and that can be frustrating. That's the other edge of that double-edged sword. But sometimes with security vulnerabilities, it takes a little while to get it right once it's discovered. So a very quick fix was made in version 2.15, but very soon after that fix, we discovered other vulnerabilities, and we needed to plug them with additional fixes. Now, 2.17.1 has been out for a number of months now, and it's been pretty stable. So we have a high degree of confidence that if you upgrade to that version, you're going to be safe, at least from the perspective of Log4Shell. Nobody has found new vulnerabilities along the same vector with the latest version of Log4j. What presentation wouldn't be complete without a poorly drawn diagram? So here's mine, and this is kind of under the hood of Log4j, and it may leave you scratching your head like, why do we have this pile of network protocols built into our humble logger? Well, a little later, we're going to look at some of the history and what led to this infrastructure being built into the logger. And the spoiler alert there is that there was a valid use case, and it went through kind of the normal open source process. We'll look at that in more detail, but let's focus a little bit on the anatomy. So imagine you're building an app. It's creatively called My App over here. And I need to do some logging. And In this case, I'm just showing a string literal, but maybe this is some variable that represents user input. And what we see here is a string that gets interpolated by this stack that works with log4j here. So we have the $, curly braces, then we have a URL, Jindy, LDAP, and then a domain, a port, and then an endpoint. So what happens here is this gets logged, but then it triggers a Jindy call. Now, if you're not familiar with Jindy, JNDI, that's the Java Naming and Directory Interface. And like I alluded to earlier, as Java developers, we love our abstractions. So we had the great idea. We work with all these directories. We work with DNS, that's Domain Name Service. We work with LDAP, the Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. So why not have a common interface and an abstraction layer so that we can work with any type of directory? That's what Jindy does for us. And it works off of URLs. So this Jindy URL, first of all, says, well, I'm going to reach into the Jindy layer, and then I'm going to make an LDAP call to evil.com/evil to that endpoint. So Jindy knows to do an LDAP lookup. Now, here's where we get into the crux of the enabling network technologies for Log4Shell. This is an external domain that's outside of your control that Jindy is now happily reaching out to because of the fact that there was a string that gets interpolated by Java. So LDAP, this LDAP server returns a special type of response. Now, when we think of LDAP, we think of things like people and organizations. Sometimes we think of devices like printers that can be stored in LDAP. Microsoft Active Directory is a closed source proprietary version of LDAP. But it turns out that in the world of Java, you can craft an LDAP response that is valid, but that triggers another interaction with the network. So this LDAP response includes an HTTP reference. Jindy receives this LDAP response, and now it makes another request to another external domain. That returns a serialized class, and we're going to see this in action, but it's important to point out that this class is not in your application's class path. It's just leveraging how Java can deal with serialized classes. So this is just a byte array coming over the wire. Jindy then says, well, I know how to deserialize Java objects. It deserializes it, and now you have this new class that wasn't in your class path before, and mayhem ensues. Maybe that new class deletes your hard drive. That's the kind of level of access that this Log4Shell vulnerability has. Now, if this isn't entirely clear, don't worry. We're going to get into demonstrations of this next. And so let's take a look at this slide, and then we'll jump into the code. If you notice, in our try-catch block here, we have an argument. And if that argument triggers an exception, we're going to log an error, and we're going to include that argument in the error. Now, this is a little bit like a cross-site scripting attack, a classic cross-site scripting attack, in that this argument is completely unfiltered, unsanitized. It's just being passed through the logger. Now, ordinarily, we might not care about that. It's just a string, right? What could a harmless little string do? Well, if this string happens to be a Jindy string that can be interpolated, that triggers that whole network interaction. And then you might end up with an evil class like this that goes ahead and grabs your password file using the capability of Java to run an external process. So let's see this in action. What I'm about to show you is an open source project. It's Log4j shell POC. And this is something that I built off of somebody else's work, who built it off somebody else's work. We don't have a lot of original ideas, but this demonstrates the issue really well. And where we start is with a Java application that is using Log4j. And if we take a look at this code here, this method is going to be receiving a username and a password. That username and password is going to be checked. Now, this is not obviously production code because we have a simple if-else. It's checking to see if the username and password are something very specific, that is admin and password. And if so, it's going to say, welcome back, admin. If not, it's going to log the username, and it's going to say that the password you entered was invalid. Let's take a look at this in action. I already have this running. It's just, we wanted to keep it very simple, so this is just a servlet running in Tomcat. We don't have any fancy frameworks. There's no Spring Boot here, but let's take a look at this in action. So let's just say I enter admin and password, right? That's what we expect, so all good so far. Now let's say I fat finger admin. I put in admin instead. Let's go ahead and log in, and it says the password I entered was invalid. We'll log your information. Now I come back here, and if you take a look at the output, you can see that we've logged the username. Now, this is where we can get into trouble. Let's see what happens if I were to come in here, and I'm just going to make something up. This is not yet the exploit because we need some other moving parts to really take advantage of that. But let's just say I put in here Jindy, LDAP, /evil, and we'll close it off, okay? Now that's an odd username, but the problem here, actually it's not logging it out. What you can see is that the application is now hanging. If you can see my screen up here. And the application is hanging because it's attempting to reach out to LDAP, and eventually it's going to time out. So let me kill this. Let's start from the top, and let's go back and look at the other moving parts to take advantage of this exploit. So we have our application. Now we need a few other moving parts. First of all, we're going to launch a Python proof of concept. And what this Python code is going to do is it's going to generate a Java class. It's going to compile it. And then it's going to run a thin LDAP server waiting for requests. Now, it's worth looking at this Python code because you might be asking yourself, well, how did Python get into this? Python has nothing to do with the exploit. It's just a convenient language to set things up for the exploit. So if you take a look at what's going on here, it's got this Java payload, which is a Java class. It's going to generate that Java class, and then it's going to compile it. Then it's going to set up a thin LDAP server waiting for requests, and it's going to be ready to serve up the exploit based on our diagram. I'm going to jump back to the diagram just so that we can. So what this Python app does is this part of the diagram. It handles the LDAP part, and it creates the classes that are going to be returned by HTTP. All right. Now, don't mean to make you dizzy, but let me jump back here. So let's run this. It's going to ask me a couple of questions. So I want to run this on localhost. We could run this anywhere. We could actually run this on an Amazon EC2 instance, works great. But I'm going to run it all locally. And to get the shell access, we're going to set up a reverse proxy. Put a pin in that. We'll talk about the reverse proxy in just a second. But I'm going to give it this port 9001. Now what it's done is it's generated the class, it's compiled it, and now it's listening on port 1389 for an LDAP request. Now, what I want to show you over here, this is a directory listing of this folder. And if you notice, there's no evil in here, but if I do a directory listing now, I can see that exploit.class and exploit.java have been generated. And now it's kind of useful to take a look at that now generated exploit.java class. It's easier to look at it here as real Java code than embedded in that Python program. It's taking advantage of Java's process builder, and it's sending a command, which is bin shell. So that's where the log4shell name comes from, because we're going to be functioning as well. And then it's opening some sockets, and it's just reading and writing data to that socket. That's where our reverse proxy comes in. So let's finish up the moving parts that we need for this exploit. So we have the LDAP piece. That's step one. Now we need our reverse proxy. We're going to use netcat for that. If you're not familiar with netcat, there's a lot of great docs for it, but suffice it to say, our reverse proxy, this is where we're going to get shell access. And then the last moving part is an HTTP server to deliver the serialized evil class. If we go back to our diagram, that's this part of the diagram down in the bottom. So we have this HTTP server that's going to return the evil class. All right, let's take a look at this in action. We have all our moving parts now. And so now I'm going to come back and actually I need to copy and paste this. So this is the string that's now going to kick all this off. So I'm going to paste that in for my username. It doesn't really matter what I put in for password. I'm going to click login, and now it's hanging again, which is expected because now with all of this plumbing and architecture, we're ready to have access to the shell. So first of all, notice that an LDAP reference has been made, an LDAP request has been made, and now it's redirecting over to HTTP exploit class. Now, if I look over at our HTTP server, we can see that exploit class was returned, and exploit class is the thing that hooks into our reverse proxy, and we can see that our reverse proxy now has a connection, and we now have a shell. So let's see what that looks like. Well, I can issue a command like, who am I? And now I get a response, Micah Silverman. So we don't see the typical shell prompt, but we are connected to a shell through this reverse proxy. I can do a listing of the folder that we're in, and this shows us everything in that folder. I can output the password file. I could run a service that would exfiltrate all kinds of data over to somewhere else. I could dump databases. I have full access to the command line. So hopefully this gives you a little taste of why this vulnerability is so serious and important. Okay, now I'm going to, the next thing we're going to do is talk about some remediation. So here's the problem. I'm gonna shut all this down. Hopefully the problem is a little more clear. I'm gonna shut down my Tomcat server. I'm shutting everything down because when we return to the code, we'll be talking more about the deep dive that I want to show you, which is over in this project. I'm just going to set things up here. Okay, we'll come back to this in a little bit. So, and this ended up getting reset because I killed everything, but it would have hung there pretty much indefinitely. So let's talk a little bit about remediation because we have an understanding of the problem, but where do we go from here? Well, we have some great resources. One of them is the cheat sheet that I alluded to earlier. And the cheat sheet, the first two items in the cheat sheet, and it's roughly in order of importance, like the lower the number, the more important it is that you take those steps. So the first two are finding where in your project you have log4j, and sometimes that's not obvious. You may not be using log4j, but you may have a dependency that's using log4j. So it might be a transitive dependency, and sometimes it's hard to find those. So the first step is to know in your project where you're using Log4j. The next step is everywhere you're using Log4j to make sure that it's at version 2.17.1. That's the best way to mitigate Log4j. But that's not always possible. As I said earlier, you may have to do some interim management until you have some sort of window where you can have some downtime and redeploy your app, for instance. So we have a number of other recommendations. One thing you can do is just delete the JNDI lookup class from Log4j. So this is some real kind of patchwork hackery here. But if JNDI lookup doesn't exist in the jar that you're using, then it can't be exploited. So that's an option. Rather than go, maybe your deploy takes a half an hour. Well, rather than redeploy, you could go and do a little surgery, do a quick restart of your app, and now you're protected until you can really do the full deploy. Another thing to look at is restricting egress. So this gets into network firewall rules. For instance, if your application is not able to make LDAP calls, maybe you don't need LDAP. Maybe you don't need LDAP at all in your application. And so you can, at the firewall level, disable LDAP connections. And then even though Log4j may try to make an LDAP connection, it'll fail because you've disabled it at the firewall. Now, this could expose some other problems. You might run into certain threads in your application hanging, and you might even run into a denial of service attack if somebody catches on to that. But that's at least a short-term mitigation to address the issue. Another resource we have is our awesome, I left our awesome cheat sheet out of the picture here. Oh no, here it is. We have this repo on our Sneak Labs organization called Awesome Log for Shell. I'll make sure that all of these links are in the chat during the QA at the end. But in this, this follows this awesome format, which you may or may not be familiar with. It's just kind of a structured list of references. I'm one of the contributors to it. And you have bullet points in these different sections. So we have a bunch of explanations. We have a bunch of videos, vulnerable software. We even have memes. What explanation wouldn't be complete without some good memes here? So this is a really great resource for understanding Log4j and for mitigating Log4j. All right, couple more things before we get into the deep dive. Let's look at, there's kind of different levels of help that you can get from tools in mitigating these sorts of issues. So let's take a look at my command line here. And from the command line, I can run Sneak test. Sneak has a command line tool. Let me just make this a little bit bigger. I'll clear the screen. Now, Sneak, oh, I'm in the wrong place. Bear with me a second. There we go. Now, Sneak test is going to analyze your project, and if it finds common files, like in this case, it's a Maven project, and it found pom.xml, it's going to warn us of this critical vulnerability. It's going to give us the link to the vulnerability if we want to find out more information about it. It also gives us information about how to fix this vulnerability. And if we scroll back a little, it's giving us very specific information. And Log4j 2.14.1 is where this vulnerability lives. And so it's telling us that we can fix this. It's telling us directly how to fix it by upgrading from 2.14.1 to 2.17.1, as I explained earlier. So this is a great mitigation tool. It finds the vulnerability and it tells us how to update it. But we can take it a step further. Another tool that we have here is the Intellij Sneak plugin. And actually, let me go back here. And this is the code that we just ran. And using the Intellij plugin, before I ever deploy it, before I ever test it locally, I can just run a scan, and it's going to scan a number of things that you can see enumerated here. Let me collapse this for a second. So it's scanning our open source dependencies, it's scanning our code security and our code quality, and then it's looking at configuration issues and container vulnerabilities. Now, in this particular very small example, we don't have any of this other stuff going on, but it shows us right in Intellij this critical vulnerability that we have for Log4Shell. So that is another place to go to help mitigate. It tells us what's wrong. It shows us how to update it, and it gives us similar information to what we saw on the command line. Now, I would say that's kind of a first pass, a great way to kind of know as you go. But really, the best way to catch these early is to use the monitoring service from Snyk. And you can do this from the command line as well, but we're gonna show it right here. And I can go and add a project, and let's see if we survive the demo monster here, because you know, this is a live demo. I haven't added this, and I'm looking for. You can see I have a lot of projects. I'm looking for Log4j. Alphabetizing is important. So bear with me while I find it. Here we go. Log4Shell, Log4j shell proof of concept. I'm going to add this repository. Now it's scanning it kind of like I did from the command line, and this should go reasonably fast. We'll give it a sec. But it should come up with the same vulnerabilities. What makes this kind of the next level is that once I add it through this dashboard, either through the web interface or the command line, it's now actively monitored. That means once a day, it's going to be rescanned. And if there's a new vulnerability discovered, it will notify me. And so I don't have to worry about, let's say at some point somebody discovers a vulnerability in 2.17.1 of Log4j. Well, I would get notified that a new vulnerability has been discovered in my code, and then we would and then we would be able to fix it. Oh, it looks like I had previously imported this. Well, let's take a look at what's the one that I care about. Oh, this isn't it. It's this one. Okay, that's the one I care about. Let's go here. And so it's speaking to a number of different issues here, but these are all within the code. It doesn't look like yet it has finished telling me about the Log4j issue. There we go. This is what I was looking for. So now, if I go and look here, first of all, it shows me the issue, Log4j, and it gives me an opportunity to fix these issues right here. So I can click on Fix These Vulnerabilities, and I can open a fix PR, a fix pull request, and this gets created right in this repo. And so Snyk will help me come right up to the point of completely being automated, but it does stop short of actually merging this. It relies on a human interaction to merge this, and that actually makes a lot of sense. All right, so if we look at the PR, what it's actually changing is very simple, a single line. It's going to upgrade Log4j from 2.14.1 to 2.17.1. And in addition to taking us all the way to the point of a pull request that then a human being can decide to merge or not, this project is now being actively monitored. So once a day, it's going to be rescanned. And if anything changes, if there are new vulnerabilities that have been discovered, you'll get notified about that. All right, with all that under our belt, let's take a look. Let's take a deep dive under the hood into how the mechanics of Log4Shell and what's going on with that. And before we do that, it's always nice to start with a little history lesson. If you're like me, you may have been wondering, like, how did we get to this place where this pile of networking architecture got into the humble logger? Well, what I have up on my screen here is the original request that was made to integrate Jindy into Log4j. And I just want to say at the outset, no shade to the volunteer maintainers of Log4j, no shade to the requester. This was kind of a very innocent request that went through kind of normal channels. One thing that's worthwhile pointing out is that this was created on July 13th of, or rather July 17th of 2013. So Log4Shell, as we now know it, has been lying dormant in Log4j for a long time. But if you look here, this is a developer who said, hey, I have this use case. I'd like to integrate Jindy into Log4j. This developer even provided a patch, and this is where Jindy lookup came to be integrated into Log4j. It went through a review, it got integrated, and now Jindy support was part of Log4j. Great, valid use case. Now, we might debate about the validity of the use case or the how important the use case was, but this is how open source projects go. Somebody, an intrepid developer has an idea for a use case, it goes through a review, and it's either going to be integrated or shut down. Another interesting historical data point is fast forward 3 years from this initial integration, and we get to Black Hat 2016. And this is a presentation from Black Hat 2016. And the interesting thing about this presentation is it highlighted 2 of the 3 components of Log4Shell. So in 2016, we started to get some knowledge about this, the core of this vulnerability. And this presentation was all about Jindy and Jindy injection, and in particular, LDAP and Jindy. The combination of Jindy and LDAP was identified as problematic back in 2016. Now, this wasn't focused on Log4j at all, but this problem existed in Log4j at the time of this posting, way back in 2016. So what happens a lot of times with vulnerabilities is we find out that they've been dormant for a long time. And hopefully what that means is just that nobody discovered it. But as security professionals, we have to assume that somebody discovered it and has been exploiting it and was smart enough to keep quiet about it so that it was undiscovered. So it may mean that this has been exploited since as early as 2013. Now, it doesn't seem very likely, but that is a possibility that as security professionals, we have to take into account. All right, to wrap things up here, let's take a nice little tour of Log4Shell. And the way that we're going to do that is with this proof of concept example that I created. And this is part of a bigger repo on GitHub called Java Goof. Now in Sneak Labs, we have a bunch of these Goof repos, and they're purposely vulnerable, which is why we call them Goof. We want to make sure that people don't mistake them for like regular open source projects. And this Java Goof has a lot of examples in it. It's a multi-module, Maven multi-module project. And one of the examples is Log4Shell Goof. If we expand Log4Shell Goof, we can see that there's 2 other modules, one's client and one's server. And if we expand that, why am I expanding all these things? Well, what I want to show you is that when we get down finally to the actual code, we can see that evil, this evil class, which is going to be the class that's up to no good, it's in the Log4Shell project, and it is not in scope, it's not in the class path of the client project. That's an important point to know, because it's one of the reasons that this exploit is such a high priority, because I can deliver a poison class that then your code will happily execute and can generate a lot of trouble. Now, what I want to do, this is what I call the nothing up my sleeves part. What's going to ultimately happen as our proof of concept is a file is going to get written to the file system by this poison malicious class. So first I'm going to take a look in my temp folder. And you can see I ran this before. So the first thing I want to do is delete this pwned file, because I want to prove that this malicious code can write that pwned file. Now let's take a look at what's happening in our client class. This is our main class from the client. First, it's going to show us some information about our Java environment. Next, it's going to do a very simple log message. This is not a bad message. It's just going to do a test message. Then it checks to see if the temp file exists. Because we want this to be a standalone proof of concept, at this point, the temp file shouldn't exist. And if it does, it kind of invalidates our results. So if the temp file exists, it's going to blow up at this point. Next, it's going to do a logger error output that includes a Jindy reference, just like we saw before. It's going to wait a beat because we are dealing with the file system. It's going to make sure that the file actually got written out. Then it's going to check for that temp file once more. And now we expect the temp file to be present. And if it is, then we win. We've proven that this exploit was successful. So that is the client side. Let's take a look at the server side. Let me make this a little bigger. Now, the server side does a couple of very simple things. It sets up a very lean LDAP server. This is not a full-blown LDAP server. It's just for the purposes of demonstration. So it sets up a lean LDAP server, and it sets up a lean HTTP server, and it's just sitting there waiting for requests. So let's start by firing up our server. This should take just a moment. And now over here, you can see that the LDAP server is listening on port 9999, and the HTTP server is listening on port 8000. Now, just as a reminder, we have both of these pieces because we need both an LDAP server and an HTTP server to pull off the whole round trip of this exploit. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to debug main, and what you'll see is that I've set some strategic breakpoints that'll help us understand what's going on underneath the hood of this exploit. So I'm going to now fire up our main class. And in short order, we get to our very first breakpoint. And what's happening here is the if we look at the console, so it checked for the existence of that. It gave us the information about our JDK. It checked for the existence of that pwn file. It doesn't exist. And now we've gone into this no longer existent JNDI lookup file. And the reason that we find ourselves here is because of the Jindy lookup string. And now it knows that it's going to make an LDAP request. So it went to log out that message. That log message included a string that could be interpolated. It looked at the string and found that it was a Jindy lookup, and now it's about to go and do the LDAP lookup that's based on that Jindy URL. So let's continue on, and this will bring us to our next breakpoint. And let me jump over to the server. If you notice, on the server side, the LDAP request has been made and a redirect has been sent to this endpoint. Well, if we look at the details of what that looks like, if you remember before, I said that we can have a specially constructed LDAP response that triggers this behavior, and that's what we're looking at here. This LDAP response includes 4 keys: object class, Java codebase, Java factory, and Java class name. And this results in another request, an HTTP request, by virtue of the value of these variables. So Java codebase is this URL, and then the Java factory that we're going to be retrieving is this evil class. And so that response triggers Jindy to make that HTTP request. Let's look at that next. So now we're in our directory manager, and we're about to go and retrieve the Java class, the remote Java class, using that URL. And now if we look back at our server, we're not quite there. We'll be there in a second. Where we are right now is we're about to get an object factory from a reference. So the reference in this case is that LDAP response that has those 4 attributes. And now it's going to call this get object factory from reference. And it's at this point that the HTTP request is going to be made. So let's go through that. And now I can see that the HTTP request has been made and a byte array has been returned. That byte array has been deserialized into this factory object. And now we're about to call the get object instance method on that factory object. Well, let's trace into that and see what that factory object is. And in fact, I can give you a little spoiler alert. If we look down here at the bottom, you can see that the factory is this evil class, which, as a reminder, does not exist in the class path of our client. Well, let's trace into this. And now through the magic of Intellij and its ability to manage Maven multi-module projects, we can see this evil class, because even though it's not in the class path of the client, it is in the class path of the server. And if we look here, we can see that it's going to run a command. It's going to use the shell to run a command where it creates this file, temp owned, and it's going to use the runtime. So this is just standard Java. It's going to get a runtime and it's going to execute that command. Now, this is all happening outside the control of my program. And if I look at the terminal and I do a directory listing again, I can see that the pwned file is there. And this all happened outside of my control because of the nature of this pile of networking architecture. And maybe for my application, I don't care about Jindy or LDAP. I'm just writing an application and I just want to log out to the console. So hopefully this demonstrates why this became such a global problem and required this level of fix. Now, we looked at Jindy lookup before, and this is the file that is buried in the log4j 2.14.1. Now, some of the early mitigations for log4shell tried to leave this in and to work around it, and other vulnerabilities and problems were discovered, not as severe, but still problems. Things like denial of service attacks were possible. And so in the latest version, this file, Jindy lookup, is just completely removed. You can still use log4j to write to databases, to use services like Datadog or Sumo Logic. You just can't use Jindy lookups anymore because of this vulnerability. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time and attention. Hopefully some light has been shed on this vulnerability and it's been useful for you. Now we have time for Q&A, and I'll make sure to pop some of those links into the chat. Thanks a lot.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Paul Duffy, who is the Solutions Architect Leader for North America Startups at AWS. Paul, thank you so much for taking a couple minutes and talking with me today. I do appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
Excellent. So let's talk about an initiative that AWS has going on called the Clean Energy Accelerator. Can you tell me about that, please?
Yeah, so I spend a lot of my time here with my team working with startups, and these are kind of early stage companies who are usually trying to do something disruptive. And we're always looking for programs and things that we can do to help those startups and help the chances of them being more successful. And the Clean Energy Accelerator is something that we're running, supported by an organization called Beta I. It's a 5-week virtual program that supports clean energy tech startups. It gives them a combination of different things, up to $100,000 in AWS credits, mentors, expert workshops, and so on, and ends up in this showcase in Lisbon. And it's really designed just to take this specific group of startups who are focused on specific clean energy stuff and give them some specific extra investment, both from the potential of the credits that they can use, and then also experts who can just help them with what they're doing. We also have things like the AWS Digital Innovation Team, which helps some of these startups with some things that we've found useful when innovating, working backwards from customer needs and so on. So it's really part of our overall mission to help startups in general. And this is a more specific thing for clean energy.
I love the idea that you are focusing on clean energy. And, we have been hearing a lot more these days about, ways that we can all be more sustainable. And especially when it comes to technology and just the amount of carbon, the carbon footprint of data centers and technology companies, anything that organizations can do to help reduce that carbon footprint and really make the technology and the sector more sustainable, I think is a very, very good thing. Have you seen kind of an increase in companies that are dabbling or getting more into clean energy lately?
Well, I think it's a bit of a mix. I mean, my focus in the customers that I tend to talk to, these are startups who work across a whole variety of different sectors. For the Clean Energy Accelerator, specifically, we've got some really interesting companies who are in there, and that's what they're doing. They are trying to do disruptive stuff. So they could range from hybrid green tech, which is an AI-driven virtual power plant that is helping trading energy storage going towards 100% renewable energy. We've got examples of Uprise is another example, who built the world's first commercially shippable wind turbine that fits in a shipping container. So those are companies who literally have come from not existing before they started as startups, who are trying to solve these problems specifically. And then I think more generally, any of the large company you talk to would probably have the same thing that they would be talking about. I don't think you could find a large enterprise who isn't focused in some way on improving things from a sustainability point of view. I spend less time with those larger companies just because of the focus of what I do. And this accelerator, startups always teach us something about disruption. They're taking on these really, really difficult challenges, which have high chances of failure and really, really difficult hills to climb. And we do these programs like this accelerator to help them, to give them extra support and increase the likelihood that they'll be successful in these really, really hard targets.
So you did mention, one or two of the accelerators or the startups, what they're doing. Can you give us an idea of what some of the other ones are doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's a range. There are IoT-based startups. There are people who are trying to improve things for solar, people trying to do things with hydrogen. And when you start to look at these startups, you find really interesting, you find everything from groups of scientists who are super deep in kind of doing membrane technology stuff and trying to harness different biological stuff. There's way out of my area of expertise to make stuff better. You've got some companies who are trying to take and provide kind of SaaS type offerings to companies who can do the trading kind of stuff. Andy Jassy, the CEO of Amazon, the former CEO of AWS, I mean, he used to talk about kind of every imaginable use case. And that's the kind of the thing with clean energy. For this accelerator this time around, we took 12 companies from 420 applicants across 58 different countries. And again, it's inspiring to see the range. I just mentioned, I mentioned a couple out of the sample that we had this time, but it's really, really pretty broad. And anything that you could think of in clean energy, ideas that I certainly wouldn't have thought of, that I don't have the kind of the biological or science background, all the way to kind of people who are trying to do business model stuff that's useful. Or like the wind turbine example, where everyone's driven around and seen a wind turbine. What this startup is trying to do is disrupt is they're making a wind turbine that you can put in a shipping container and take to different parts of the world.
That's really, really cool. And as I understand it, you mentioned that AWS is actually doing this in a number of different sectors. But you're focusing on clean energy. But what are some of the other areas that AWS is helping startups with?
So there's a few different ones. So I mean, first of all, it's the AWS platform offers this set of building blocks that would help a startup, whatever their use case is. So our mission is to work backwards from kind of any customer, any startup that wants to do anything. But we do have a number of these specific accelerators. So the clean energy one that we just discussed is one example. We also have one for space. We have one for robotics. And then one that we announced recently is the AWS Impact Accelerator. And the Impact Accelerator isn't so much focused on technology, but this is focused on underrepresented founders, specifically Black, Latino, LGBTQIA and women founders. We announced the first part of that, which was the Impact Accelerator for Black founders. And again, that offers these customers up to $100,000 in AWS credits. It offers them $125,000 in cash. And then it gives them this structured program where they get technical advice on how they can better build. They get market advice from different people. And they get the chance to build this kind of customized curriculum for mentorship and so on that helps them take their ideas to market. And then from the technology point of view, which is what my team is most focused on, it's like we know all of these startups have limited resource. They have limited time. They have limited engineering capacity. And typically in the early days, they're going to have limited money. How can we help them get the most done while they spend the smallest amount of money, the smallest amount of time, the smallest amount of effort possible? And then the other thing is, how can we've worked with a lot of companies to help them as they're doing their disruptive problems and building infrastructure. How can we help those companies? We've been with people who've done it before, instead of them having to reinvent the kind of the undifferentiated infrastructure part of what they're doing. You talked about containers before. We work with a lot of different startups who do stuff with containers. And so for that early stage startup, Andy Jassy used to say, there's no compression algorithm for experience of running a cloud platform. And I agree with that. But we do think we can be this kind of compression algorithm for, instead of you having to learn as a startup founder everything about containers, we can help you make the most pragmatic decisions, and we can help you make the kind of spend the smallest amount of money on the cloud to last as long as possible and to give you the kind of the quickest time to value for your customers and so on.
Very, very cool. And how long do these programs last? If they're selected as one of the startups, how long do you work with them?
So, I mean, the programs themselves, the clean energy one, for example, is a 5-week program, but the things don't stop there. For the clean energy one, for example, startups continue to get pilot support through the end of October. And then the other thing is, when I mentioned the credits, I referred to them as credits as part of our Activate program. We have a broad program called Activate that literally, if you were to found a startup tomorrow, you can join the Activate program. You get a certain amount of credits. That amount of credits goes up as you potentially get more investment, or if you're accepted into one of these accelerators. And then Activate is something that goes on for a much longer period of time. So you become a member of that program, and that gives you a whole host of benefits, whether it's the credits that we talked about, whether it's offers, networking events, other things that hopefully will increase the chances of you being more successful as a startup. You're the one with the disruptive idea, but we've got this technology platform that hopefully can help you quickly, cheaply, and with a very low amount of effort get towards building that kind of disruptive business that you founded.
That's very cool. That's a very, very on so many levels. This is a program that does a lot of good for the community at large. So, Paul, thank you so much for having the conversation with me. This is a great initiative. I love the Clean Energy Accelerator. I think that is a great program. But the whole AWS initiative is certainly worth kudos. So thank you very much for your time and for walking me through what you guys are doing over there at AWS. Thanks again. I do appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more Techstrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond, CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Tony Lee, who is the Chief Technology Officer at Hyperscience. Tony, thank you so much for it.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Charlene. Thanks for having me.
Excellent, excellent. So I want to talk to you a little bit about automation and humanizing automation. But before we get started with that, I wonder if you could introduce us to Hyperscience.
Oh, sure. Hyperscience is a startup based in New York that is founded with the premise of automating the back office of large companies, but with a specific focus on the human-centered nature of automation. And that's why this talk is perfect for where we're going with the company. The notion of automating processes and document content processing is fundamentally part of the human process of what the work that these companies do. And we want to make sure that's emphasized and not lost in this push to automation, where the mental model a lot of people have is it just replacing people. Mm-hmm. And we think it's much broader and bigger. It has a much bigger societal impact that we want to explore and advocate for.
That's great. That's great. And you actually kind of hit the nail on the head there when you said that, so many people think that automation is there to replace them and their jobs. And I'm hearing more and more that automation actually adds value to their jobs and helps them become a much better employee, a much better worker, much more productive, much more engaged. But tell me about how you guys kind of go about humanizing, if you will, automation.
I think it's a recognition that the type of work that people are doing is changing over time, and there's societal pressures on this. We see the Great Resignation happening. We're seeing the business economics of having a livable wage in some of these more mechanical rote type of roles. At the same time, technology continues to advance, and technology has always been a driver of change of the type of work that we do. Mm-hmm. When we look at these back office processes where people are keying in data that they're reading from forms, before systems to key the data into existed, obviously these roles didn't exist. And so there's always constant change happening in the environment. When we talk about the humanization of the automation, it's around looking at the roles that the computer can play and help the person be better. And some of this comes off as a direct replacement. For example, if a person is reading a form and keying in data, a computer for 99% of the time can probably do that better, faster, more accurate, depending on what the input looks like and what the output looks like. But there's always going to be a 1%, maybe it's 5%, but it's going to be a small percentage of things that are just not going to work for the computer because these are human-generated documents. And that means they're messy just because we're people. And that's the way the world works. And computers aren't perfect. And so that's the opportunity where the human needs to be what we call human in the loop to help the machine perform better. And this is not let's do this 40 hours a week of helping the computer. This is the computer tells me when it needs help and I'll be doing something else. And then I can step in and help the computer do better. The other part of this, what am I doing with my time also instead of working on this mechanical task all the time? And that's up leveling. And that's really looking across the processes, finding how we can define the process better, apply automation where it makes sense, and make everything more efficient. And I think we lose that forest for the trees when we're just doing the day-to-day routine. Now, it's a different set of skills, and I think that's a big challenge a lot of people have, is that we do need to invest in the people and in society in general to up-level people to do those more abstract roles. And I think that's a challenge that as a company, as an organization, as a country, we need to help invest in people to get them there. Because the numbers really don't add up. When you think about if I replace like 20 operations people who are keying in data with 2 supervisors that are watching the machines, then people look at that, it's 20 jobs for 2 jobs. Those other 2 jobs are much more fulfilling for people, much higher salary, higher value to the company as well. And that helps the company be more successful. and that alone will generate more jobs. And I think we've seen a number of analysts and reports from various sources that also see this general job growth, but it's not the same kind of job. And that's the important aspect of it.
Well, we're also talking about as technology advances, there are going to be new jobs created that we don't even know about these days right now. So, we're going to need people to fill those jobs. So obviously up-leveling can kind of help close that gap, if you will, with those new jobs that are coming down the pike. Is that something that that you're kind of seeing in the space that as automation kind of takes or takes a hold in certain organizations, that they actually do see a new kind of level of jobs opening up and enabling the organization to maybe move beyond where it is today?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And yes, the nature of our automation is machine learning based, so it's AI based, and that is a specialized skill that people think it's like rocket science, but there is a part of it that does feel and look like rocket science. But there's a lot of part of it that is actually not. You don't need a PhD to go help the machine get better. There's a training capability. There's a quality assurance role in there that helps the machine get better all the time. That is it is a more complex job, but it is not a super specialized job that I think that people cannot make the change to if they're doing something like a data king role today. So we have to help people get into that. And there's a lot more of these. Not that the machines are pushing on a lot of the decisions that are being made. But there's also, again, going back to let's step back and look at the process. Like we're running processes in these companies that are 30, 40 years old. I used to work in a mortgage software company, and the U.S. mortgage process is very archaic. And we want to be able to step back and look at how to make this process more efficient, both for the companies that are servicing the process, but also for the end customer who's going to see the value to their own day-to-day lives of having processes that are faster, with less errors, that are more robust. And we need people to step back and look at, process analyst type roles to really look and see how we can make the process more modern and different today.
Do you see this, automation in general being more applicable in certain industries? I mean, you mentioned the mortgage industry. I mean, obviously that's a very heavy paper-based, process-oriented area. But are there certain areas where maybe automation can have more of an impact for organizations than others?
I do think so. That is both an artifact of technology as well as culture. Where are we willing to accept automation more within what our company does and operates? I think the document processing space, content processing, taking forms in, taking content in, and automatically processing that to a great extent is an area that there's increasing appetite for, both from a comfort level, but also just the efficiency gains are so obvious. I think that companies, it's a bit of a no-brainer now that if you can do it well, you can have a competitive advantage and you can have more value to the customer. But I do see this general trend. I was thinking about supermarkets this morning, and I think when you think about the automation in the supermarkets, I was going through self-checkout, and that's not really an automation. There's not really a strong automation piece to this, but it is a rethinking of the process, right? Where they've taken, instead of having a bunch of cashiers, they've gone to having self-serve checkout lanes with a single supervisor watching, right? And it's the same sort of dynamic. In this case, they didn't offload the work to AI, they offloaded work to the customers, which I would think is fairly brilliant. But you also have these stores now that are emerging where it's just, there is no checkout, and that is all AI driven. And that's the next step of technology driven innovation. So I think it's, again, society and technology driven across the landscape. From a business perspective though, like anything heavy paper where people have to look and inspect, that's just something that machine learning does really well at today.
It also seems to me that there's got to be kind of a culture shift regarding automation for it to really, really be effective, because we're still kind of stuck in this mindset where people do really believe that automation is going to take their job. And so, how do you think organizations can kind of move the needle, if you will, and help people understand that it really isn't, it's automation is there to help them, not to hurt them?
Yeah, I think it starts from the beginning. I think exactly what you said. It's the automation. We should view automation as augmentation of human, not replacement of human, right? And then there are degrees of augmentation, but we should be really talking about it with that lens, and then make it real for people. Like, this is what it's going to do for you. So you don't have to read those forms and type lots of stuff, but you'll have full visibility on the decisions it's making. When it's confused or not sure, you can then decide what to do. You can even decide, what confidence you need in the results. That's all the human piece of it, the judgment piece that we still need the person for. The machine is just there to take the mechanical piece out. Mm-hmm. And I think building the tools and the usability, just making them baked into the platform or the software that you're using, is how that becomes obvious to the end user, that it's just another tool, really. It's not a replacement of them. It's another tool that will change their job just like many other tools did. But really, it's there to help them.
All right. So, I feel like we've been talking about automation and this type of benefit to the workforce for quite a while, but where do you think we are kind of on that adoption curve with automation?
Oh, I think we're still early, and yes, it's something we've talked about for a long time. One of the reasons I joined Hyperscience recently, about 8 months ago, was even 20 years ago, I was working on a business process software solution. There was no AI, no machine learning, but it was around trying to automate processes for large companies, very similar space. And when I think about what the difference today is and why I was eager to jump back, I think it is the AI and machine learning piece. It allows a lot more. It allows the automation systems to deal with a lot more ambiguity. And that's the thing that was so difficult 20 years ago, is that we would build the perfect business process structure. There was code, no code, it was running. But business processes change so much because there are people involved, right? And it can change as simply as somebody leaves the company and suddenly your business process has changed. And dealing with that ambiguity, the change management was really hard 2 decades ago. So I do think there's a technology inflection that's underway right now that allows it to be a lot more robust and a lot less. The cost to operate is much cheaper in the world that business processes, we're still people. So the rate of change is still going to be there. So I think that's important. I think there's also a culture change, a need for efficiency that's happening as well. The fact that people are looking for livable wages is important. How many of our businesses are built on the assumption that we can pay people little money to do very mechanical work, right? And, if that's part of your business model, then I think you're being challenged right now, and you need to find a better solution than depending on people to do those roles.
I think, with the advances in technology, you're absolutely right. I think, now we're going to start seeing a lot more organizations look to automation to help them, achieve a higher level of productivity and, move their business forward. And so much of the last, I would say 10, even 20 years has been kind of getting people to recognize that, we're not talking science fiction, that this actually is reality now. I mean, I think everybody has this kind of mindset of, it being kind of, so far out there, again, in the realm of science fiction, that it's really not, it's not really applicable in business, but absolutely it is. And I think people are really starting to adopt that mindset that, we are in, we're very real times when it comes to this technology. So I fully believe we're going to see an increase in the use of automation and technologies such as yours. Tony, thank you so much for walking me through, what you guys are doing and where you see automation happening. I think it's a great conversation. I'm sure we're going to be continuing it later on.
Oh, it would be my pleasure. Thank you so much, Shelley.
Great. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more Techstrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotech conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotech conferences are produced by Techstrong Live and powered by Techstrong Group.
This is Techstrong TV.
With the great pleasure of being joined by Ron Perez, who's Intel Fellow, Chief Security Architect with Intel. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you. Pleasure to be.
I think you're my first Intel Fellow that I've had an interview with.
Well, we're a dime a dozen these days.
Yeah, are you? Okay, I didn't know. But I'm glad you're here with us either way. Well, tell us a little about you. You don't become an Intel Fellow overnight. I'm sure you've done a lot of very interesting and challenging things through your career. If you can kind of give us just a little bit about yourself.
Sure. It's taken me maybe around 3 decades now to get to this place, right? But yeah, a lot of experience, right? I've only been at Intel though for the last 5 years. Right, focusing, as we've talked about, on data center security mainly, right, but also any security technologies more broadly. That's where the Chief Security Architect title comes in, right? I have responsibilities across all of our business units, all of our technologies, right, for the security technologies that we're putting into our products, right. But before then, right, I had many years of experience at IBM Research, right, TJ Watson Research, at AMD, at Motorola, right, and a few other places along the way.
Been around the hardware universe for quite a while.
Yeah, I keep trying to. I'm a software guy by education, let's say, right? And I've been trying to get away from hardware, right, for almost 30 years now, right? And it keeps kind of pulling me in. But I enjoy it, right? You get to really see where where the rubber hits the road, really, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where that software and hardware come together.
Now we love to talk about cloud and all things that have moved to the cloud. Guess what's underneath all those clouds? Computers, storage, all kinds of hardware things, right?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your work in security. You were talking before about data at rest, data in motion, data being computed on. Tell us a little bit about what your work is.
Yeah, I think since I have been in the industry for a long time, right, and most of that has been in security, at least like the last couple of decades, let's say. The thing that I've seen that has been the most exciting, right, in the recent years, let's say the past decade, right, has been the emergence of what's now called confidential computing, right? In terms of a real paradigm shift in security, right? Computer security, where a lot of the work that was established back in the 60s and 70s, actually 1960s and 1970s, right, with Orange Book and the DoD space, right? That was kind of the beginnings of everything we know about security today, right? And there has been a few things that have happened to really shift the paradigm a little bit in that time frame, right? But really now with confidential computing, this ability to no longer look at the entire stack, computing stack, from the hardware up to the application layer, and then to say, well, if I need to really trust my application and need to know what it's doing, I also have to trust all the software underneath it, right? The operating system, the hypervisor, the hardware, and everything else, right? But with confidential computing, that basically says, look, all you have to trust is your software, your data, and the underlying hardware, right? The rest of the software on the system is there to help make forward progress, right? But it can't access your data, it can't see your secrets, it can't modify your data, right? It can't change your computation, and you get verifiable evidence of all of that, all of those nice security properties directly from the hardware. So that's pretty powerful when you take it now to a cloud computing environment, which is all about computing in a shared space, right? Shared computing environment. So.
It's just funny how those, I began my career back in school in the 70s, began back in the 80s, and some of those same paradigms, people say, oh, we used to do just that, very similar things. Yeah. Some of the same concepts have obviously rolled forward and evolved and gotten more sophisticated too. It's always an interesting conversation about how do we protect data in memory, how you protect data, but also it sounds like you're talking about protecting data while it's being computed upon, while it's inside, rolling around inside the chips, the firmware, software that's happening inside of that. So that sounds like you're talking about sort of protection of data, almost protective memory while it's active and being used.
Yeah, think about what we usually mean, right? And we talk about computer security, about protection, right? There's usually a component of encryption in here, right? Because that's the mathematical way to offer some security guarantees or assurances, right? There's a lot of other things you do with access control and everything else, but usually encryption is at the heart of it. We certainly see that for protection of data at rest, right? Where we have self-encrypting drives and really nice, storage encryption capabilities, right? And so obviously the security relies, all on the key at that point, right? Same with network security, right? It's all about, TLS, SSL, right? IPsec, right? All these nice security protocols that all utilize encryption to a great degree. Now we're talking about how do you protect data in memory when it's being computed on in a server, in a cloud, or on, some device hanging off a telephone pole that's talking to your car, right? Maybe in a potentially hostile environment. How do you actually provide that same level of protection, right? Traditionally, we've done that through operating systems that have provided separation, right, of the execution environment. But confidential computing really takes it, the next level beyond. It talks about encrypting the data in memory, right, so that it's always encrypted in memory. It's only decrypted when the processor has to operate on it. And again, right, that allows you to say that now all I have to rely on is the hardware that's providing that capability, that encrypted memory capability, and the software that you're running in this environment. I don't have to worry about the operating system or anything else anymore.
Interesting. So we're not relying on the OS to establish the boundaries of protected memory.
That's right.
Across different applications, user spaces, whatever it might be.
Yeah. So the operating system now, or in a hypervisor, right, in a cloud environment or virtualized environment, its whole responsibility is to make sure that that unit of compute makes forward progress, that it gets scheduled, right? It can't look into what's inside that environment anymore. It can't modify it. All it can do is stop it from running, right? So you still have denial of service, right? But you no longer have a confidentiality or integrity, issue to worry about.
It hasn't been manipulated, changed, or even accessed, I guess, if it's being protected.
Yeah, even access, right. Only the software that's supposed to access the data can access the data, right? And the hardware directly offers those assurances.
I'll ask the thermometer in the room question. How does it know? How does it know what should be accessing that data?
So with the technology that Intel invented before I got here, right? So I'm not just touting my own work, right? Called software guard extensions, or SGX, right? That was really the inspiration for what we now call confidential computing. And there are other solutions coming out even from our competitors, right? So it's nice to see the industry following suit. But SGX, right, the software guard extensions technology, its approach was probably the boldest, the most aggressive, right? It really tried to say, can we, by through pure instructions, right, hardware instructions, can we provide the capabilities for the software to create this secure computing environment? And from then on, right, the hardware itself understands, right, the context, right, that the software is executing in, and it will provide the separations, and of course it provides the encrypted memory support, right? So all this is done, magically, right, by the processor, right?
Does this apply to persistent storage as well, or primarily, storage that's that can be gone once you're done computing?
Volatile memory.
Volatile memory.
Yeah, chiefly looking at volatile memory, right?
Okay.
Because that's what everybody's operates in normally, right? But as we're seeing the memory hierarchy start to evolve, right, to where you have, obviously you have caches, which is some form of memory on the processor itself. You'll have, maybe high bandwidth memory on the chip, right, which is sort of like an extended cache, right? Then you have main, DDR memory. And now you're starting to see non-volatile memories start to come into play too, right? Whether they're solid state based or, Intel has their own 3D crosspoint technology. And then finally, the last stage of that hierarchy is disk, right? Or used to be tape, right? In the days, but now it's disk, right? So SGX chiefly looks at, the memory that's being used actively, right? So that could be, caches, HBM, DDR. Yeah.
Interesting. So from if you're going to approach this from a security practitioner who maybe isn't into the hardware aspect of this, what are the things that they're going to be interested in that you're doing that they're going to care about most? And they're going to go to their cloud provider, they're going to go to their hardware provider and say, this is what I need and why.
I think what that community is going to be interested in, it's a broad community, right, starting with developers, is the development environment, right? So you're introducing new instructions or new capabilities in your processor, right? How do I take advantage of those as a developer? And that's where SDKs and other toolkits come into play. And there are Intel, of course, have had an SDK for SGX, right, for many years now. But we're seeing a number of other open source efforts and startups and other companies, Microsoft and others, right, building environments that allow you to take an existing application, right, and kind of push a button and that wraps that application in a library OS, right? And now it's all packaged up, and as soon as it runs, it knows how to launch this secure computing environment, or what we call the trusted execution environment.
It reminds me of, there have been in different generations of chips, there have been capabilities built in that were kind of there and performing a function, but really took off when they might have, people figured out how to leverage it, like KVM, for example, to do virtual machines, things like that. It wasn't a brand new thing, but really exploded and took off. What are your hopes for what can happen with once this technology is really embraced and people figure out not only what they can use it for, but maybe uses you've hoped that we might be able to exploit?
Well, so first I'll tell you, one use case that's really kind of inspiring too, right, for this confidential computing, and then I'll kind of come back to heterogeneous computing, because we've talking mainly about CPUs, right? In our case, x86 CPUs, right? So the use case, right, that's really inspiring, right, that we're seeing a lot of traction with in terms of using this technology is around AI, right, machine learning, but more in the federated machine learning space. So federated machine learning, the idea is that you can't bring all the data together that you want to create a model from, right, or to do even inference on. Maybe because of regulation, maybe just because the data belongs to different parties, they don't trust each other, right? So you need to do the machine learning and the model training, right, at the sites, right, whoever owns the data, right? But you still want to benefit from, an aggregated model, right? Because you need more data to get a better model. Federated learning, right, and Google and others have kind of really advanced the science, right? Has allowed that to happen. The problem is now, right, that how do you know that the model that I'm training is the right model, right? It's the right analytics that I'm running on my data. And if I'm the one who's going to aggregate the model in the end, how do I know that the data was really yours, right? So there's this verifiable aspect that you need, right? That confidential computing provides, right? It tells you this is the software I was using on this platform at this time, right? And under these assurances, right? And that's the statement that now you can say, yeah, all this data that I used was legitimate data. And then when I give back the model to the people who need to use the model, they also know that yes, this model was created with legitimate data, in an environment that I trust, right? So, and then this, this is kind of the technical aspect, but the inspirational aspect is this capability now leads to, we've done different engagements with hospitals, right, in the healthcare space, and even in the kind of financial services space around anti-money laundering. These models are gold for them, right? This is really what advances their businesses, right? But it takes forever to do this without this security technology, right? This security technology now allows them to get the results that would normally have taken, like in some of the healthcare cases, 5 years to create a model, right? They can do in weeks or maybe months, just because of all the regulations they have to go through, right? But that allows them to, really speed up the time that they can, get the results they need.
Interesting. Yeah. It almost sounds like a supply chain integrity for data being computed on.
Yeah.
In a way.
That's a good example. And then the other piece that I mentioned before was, this is all about CPUs so far, right? But we're seeing, obviously, right, in the industry, computing environments become much more heterogeneous, right? You want to be able to, we talked about AI and machine learning, right? GPUs and other specialized hardware, right, are the trend today, right? Because they can really accelerate these capabilities. So what we're working on at Intel is how to extend this capability to these other devices, to these other computing environments, whether it's a GPU or a specialized accelerator, to maybe you have some compute in memory capability or compute and storage capability. How can you get those same confidential computing capabilities, right, in those other devices? And then how can you weave those all together so that you have one huge distributed workload that is now completely trusted, right, and verifiably trusted.
Interesting. If you think about sort of blockchain and where GPUs are being used in an application like that, not just for gaming. We love gamers too. And maybe they can take advantage of this as well. But you're talking about financial transactions and medical imaging, all kinds of applications that are being run on non-traditional compute platforms as well as traditional. So and we've learned our lesson, I think, multiple times in the financial world. Kind of the closer you can get to the event happening, whether that's shortening the length of the network cable to getting a data center closer to a trading platform or whatever that would be. Now we're talking about getting as close to the data that's happening in memory.
Yeah.
You want to be able to protect that. So the integrity of it, there's no unfair advantages if someone could exploit it in a way that we don't want it to be leveraged.
Yeah. And the value of the data itself may vary depending on its provenance, right? You want to know where and when the data was created. Was it created in a legitimate way, in a legitimate environment, right? Or in a geography, right? So if you're the German government, let's say, right, which is very particular about the privacy of their citizens, they may require that you can compute on the healthcare data for my citizens, but it has to be in Germany, right, within my national boundaries. We're seeing a lot of sovereignty issues, right, over data, and so these types of technologies can enforce that this technology or this data can only be computed on in these environments, and then it provides a verifiable statement afterwards that says yes, it was computed on this server that was running in Berlin, right, at this time of day or whatever.
What are some great resources for people that might want to read about SGX or SDKs that they can use to work with this technology?
Yeah, so Intel, of course, right, has a lot of information on our website, right? It's probably go to SGX or something like this on Intel's website, but there's a lot of information that you can find there. But I would say also that a good place to look more broadly at what's happening in the industry is the Confidential Computing Consortium, right? So it's an open industry initiative, right, where a lot of folks are collaborating under the Linux Foundation, right? And we're actually facilitating, additional toolkits and environments that help people use these technologies. Again, whether they're from Intel or our competitors, right, or even some of our partners, but really trying to increase the usage, right, by making it easier for people to use these technologies. And there's a lot of effort that developers especially can join in on some of these projects.
Excellent. I had no idea. I love the Linux Foundation. Had no idea they're working on this too. Well, Ron, it's really fascinating, and I'm sure glad you brought the Intel, the hardware, the technology, the security technology that you're working on. It's great to see that come to fruition. I imagine you put you and a lot of other people, a lot of hard work and dedication in your career to achieving some of these gains. So thank you for your work in this space.
It's a pleasure to talk about it. Yeah, pleasure to be with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for joining us. Ron Perez, who is Intel Fellow, Chief Security Architect.
This is Techstrong TV.
Oh, the great pleasure of being joined by PJ Kerner. PJ is CTO, co-founder with Illumio. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. Here, RSA.
Together.
Yes, together. And there's no Zoom screen between us, which is wonderful. But introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Illumio.
Yeah, so I'm one of the founders of Illumio. Illumio's mission is to prevent breaches from becoming cyber disasters. And one way I like to think about it is, if you think about how submarines are built, right? If there is, a breach of a submarine, you can shut off the compartments from each other, so the submarine doesn't sink. And so you have cyber resiliency. And the way that happens is through isolation and segmentation. So Illumio has built a zero trust segmentation platform, right? And that's how we sort of help our customers achieve that cyber resiliency.
Excellent, excellent. Well, very topical, zero trust and cyber resiliency. So tell us a little bit about, I know that you issued a report with ESG talking about zero trust, and it's a great topic. Everybody's talking about it, but everybody's also anywhere on the spectrum of their adoption and understanding to it, of just kind of coming to it, kind of figuring out what it means to them. Were there any particular things in the report and insights that you kind of gained from it you thought were either compelling to your customers, maybe even to you?
Yeah, I mean, there was a number of things. So first thing, maybe there are different philosophies on how to sort of achieve zero trust. You can take a outside-in philosophy that's starting with the end user and working our way to the application, or you could take a inside-out approach. And an inside-out approach is focusing on your data, your applications, on your critical assets, and that's what we do. And obviously, you need both of those kind of things to make a good solution. So we did this report, and it's 1,000 people responded to it. It's across multiple countries. And one of the interesting things, so some of the other interesting elements of Zero Trust is an assume breach mentality, right? And so assume breach is you have to believe that the attacker is already on the inside, and you actually, when you have that mentality, you actually think about security in a different way because they're already in the house, right? And so how do you sort of set up other barriers, other other security controls, other monitoring to sort of protect them? But so we asked a very simple question in the research, or the researchers did, right? It was, do you think you're going to get breached? So one of the fascinating answers was there was 4% of the people who said we will definitely not get breached. I'm not sure who those 4% are. But there are 4% out there.
We could ascribe some labels to those 4% people, but yeah, okay.
So
I'm with you.
So then there was another 14% that said we will likely not be breached. Okay, so now we're like, and then there was a set of what I call fence sitters. There was 31%, so it's totaled up to like 47% or so, and that said we're not sure. Right, so if you take it, half the people who said Zero Trust was important to their strategy haven't really internalized that mentality that's sort of needed to be successful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely a kind of fulcrum there that on the other side where we are all going to be breached if we haven't already. We probably already have experienced something. Hopefully we know about it. It's as much about yes, that happens, and how do you contain that? How do you respond to it? The whole process is for that. So it isn't just about prevention because you can't prevent everything.
And one other interesting stat. Now I wish we would have done this for years. I mean, Illumio was started with this idea of kind of how do we get to least privilege, right? Mm-hmm. And I think least privilege is one of those elements of Zero Trust. So we didn't start as a Zero Trust company because that wasn't even really around when we started, but we started with that philosophy in mind. So the report also sort of showed that while like 90% of the people thought that Zero Trust was one of their top 3 priorities. So that was a pretty big number.
Those are important.
And when I sort of made the comment about inside out, outside in, and I think it was like 81% of those talked about needing to do Zero Trust segmentation as part of their their strategy for Zero Trust. So that was, we have Illumio's growing business and we've sort of seen that, but we didn't have any data,
Is it translating to the customer?
Yeah.
Are they adopting more than just the label, if you will, of Zero Trust?
And that's why if we want to repeat this kind of thing to sort of see the trends over years, and we can talk next year about what's changed from last year to this year, but it would have been great to sort of see it over the past 5 years, but don't have that data today.
What do you think, studying the report as data aside for a moment, what do you hear from customers? What is their understanding of Zero Trust, and what does it mean for them to adopt it? Is there some pretty common understanding, like segmentation, for example, whatever industry you're in, or does it really kind of depend? If you're in financial services versus healthcare versus whatever, they have kind of a different flavor of it.
So Zero Trust is a misunderstood topic, and I do think people. So one of the challenges is it is a strategy, right? And a strategy. When you think of any strategy, it's probably a multi-year strategy. So the question I think people mostly have is, well, what do I do first? Even if I know what the end goal is, right? Where do I start? Where do I start so I can be successful, on that journey? So I think that's the question people ask the most. How do I get going? And I think you have to start with the end in mind, but You also need to have prove some initial value, right? Wherever you sort of start with, like how have I reduced risk by adopting this zero trust strategy? Because you have to put different pieces of the puzzle together. Like there's no one vendor you get zero trust from. You have to. It's a way of thinking.
You don't want to wait till the very end of the journey and say, "Oh, there's the benefit," right? I mean, you're increasing your ability to manage risk, respond to risk.
Well, and then sometimes there is projects when they take multi-years, then leaders sort of change. Like it is something you have to. The organization needs to adopt, right? It's not something that just one person can make happen, because there's an organizational change aspect to it.
Very good, very good. It's funny. You and I were talking about being at RSA conference. I haven't been to a session yet, even though I'm talking at one tomorrow. There were the days when I'm sure, like I did, you came and you went to a whole bunch of sessions and learned a lot of things from other people that way. In our roles, we oftentimes learn things from other people by these kind of conversations that don't make it to too many sessions. But there's still a vibe to RSA, and I get from colleagues like yourself about where we are, what's happening in the industry, and RSA being a focal point where things come together. What's your kind of sense of what's happening in security at RSA today?
I mean, one thing, obviously we didn't have that face-to-face communication, so there's a lot more collaboration that's going on. I think there's a lot more energy in that collaboration. I think people are listening harder. They're listening more intently. They're trying to get more out of that. Like we're working together, as an industry, as the vendors and customers, and I think that's great. So it's been exciting.
And that's consistent. What I've heard from other people is, it's almost like we need to continue up our game, and one of the ways we can do that is by working more closely and collaboratively together. It's not just one person's going to win at the expense of everyone else losing. We've got to do this together because we've got a lot of things that we're things we're fighting against as well. So any other things you picked up from either the report or talking with customers about zero trust you think might help someone who's on that journey trying to figure out either where to start or what the next couple of steps might be?
I guess one other quick thing was there was some interesting operational benefits, right? So because you think if you're doing there's always a cost to doing a security program, both whatever you're buying and then the people cost to implementing it. But for example, when people got visibility, because visibility is a key to providing segmentation. People got visibility, got other benefits out of it. There was a decrease of downtime, right, of applications because they were better segmented, or people understood how the applications worked better, and minimizing cost of troubleshooting. So there was a interesting side benefit, right? It was not the primary benefit, but a side benefit by actually having better hygiene about your applications and understanding what was going on. So that was
almost a resiliency benefit of having that better kind of lines of demarcation.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point, because it's we tried to do cyber resiliency, and you got side you were really doing just general resiliency, and you got other benefits out of that. It's a good way of thinking about it.
Interesting, because it's certainly a theme in software, and of course cloud and network and the whole stack.
Absolutely.
Resiliency, we can't prevent every error, just like we can't prevent every attack. So build very resilient systems and software stacks. Well, I'm excited to learn more about what's in the report. Love for other folks to be able to do that. Where can they find out more about that as well as Illumio?
Yeah, if people want to learn more, so we have a resource center on illumio.com, and they can go there and find the report.
Great. I'm sure a lot of other good resources too.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, PJ, it's been great to have you here, and good luck with the rest of the show. We look forward to our next conversation too.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
This is Digital Anarchist.
With a great pleasure being joined by Taryn Chopra. Taryn is VP of IBM Z Hybrid Cloud. Welcome, Taryn.
Thank you, Mitch. Thank you for having me on the forum.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about yourself. We all know about IBM, but say a little bit about Z Cloud, Hybrid Cloud, and we're going to get into that some more, I think.
So as you mentioned, Mitch, I'm the Vice President of IBM Z System Hybrid Cloud. And what that entails is really helping our clients realize the benefit and the value of the hybrid cloud strategy IBM has set up on our platform, on the Z System platform. And that includes, how to help clients modernize their applications on the platform, how to help them manage their real estate, both on-prem, cloud, or hybrid, or also helping clients get some of the value of the Z System platform on IBM Cloud as well. So it's kind of a very holistic portfolio, really geared towards helping clients adopt the benefit of the digital transformation that, Mitch, we are all seeing in the marketplace after the pandemic.
Yeah, it's interesting, the whole acceleration of digital transformation and the Z platform and everything, all the great things that are happening. There's some really cool news, exciting news, I know, that you'd like to talk to us about.
Yeah, definitely, Mitch. And before I talk about the news itself, right, we just recently launched Z16 platform in the marketplace, right? And if you look at how the Z System platform is performing over the last 4 or 5 years per se, it's a renaissance for the platform, right? And if you see the Z15 outperforming our Z14 platform, 67 of the top Fortune 500 companies using this platform, 47 of the top 50 banks using this platform, 8 of the top 10 insurance, and I can go on and on. One of the reasons this platform is great is all the characteristics of reliability, availability, serviceability that customers and consumers have loved over the years. In these tough times, it just comes more to the forefront. And then you add the digital transformation that is taking place in the marketplace. It was happening, I think we both agree over the last 10 plus years or so, but I think the pandemic has kind of really sharpened the C-suite focus on this whole digital transformation effort, because they have realized for them to excel in this marketplace and for them to be prepared for the next event happening in the world, they need to be prepared, and this is and Z System runs the core businesses of these major enterprises. So it becomes very important for them how to make sure their critical business is up and running. And for that, one of the key topics that has been resonating very well in the marketplace is around the whole modernization thematic, right? How to modernize their application on the platform so they can play in this modern economy, right? They can leverage the assets they have invested over the years even more better and be more agile in this environment. And part of that discussion is really around DevOps, Mitch, right? How to use the modern DevOps tooling to help facilitate that transformation. We've been, over the last, I will say 4 or 5 years, Mitch, doing a great job on the platform to enable all the open source tooling from a development testing perspective. You name the languages, the compilers, the open source tooling, the editors, the IDEs, all of that stuff, the GitLabs and the GitHubs, all of this is being available on the platform. And what we're going to announce or what we are GAing now is also making it available, some of those dev test capabilities in IBM Cloud as well. So who would have thought Z System and dev tests and Z, will be available in cloud, but our customers are looking for that agility, right? Our customers are looking for that flexibility, and they want to empower their developers even more. Skills is an important topic on the mainframe platform, on the Z System platform, right? So what we are announcing today, or what we are GAing today, is really enabling for the first time our customers to start their DevOps journey for IBM Z System platform on IBM Cloud. They can spin up a ZOS dev test environment in less than 6 minutes. Let me say that again. They can spin up a ZOS dev test environment in less than 6 minutes in IBM
I'm not
Cloud.
sure I can fill out a help desk ticket that fast.
Yeah,
so that's pretty amazing.
It is, and the feedback we have gotten from the clients, Mitch, has just been amazing. We usually run a lot of these transformative projects through our IBM design thinking methodology, really anchored on sponsor users, getting clients' feedback. What are they seeing in our these projects? What improvements we can make? Really co-create with us, right? Really co-create. It has served us very well in the Z14 program, the Z15 programs, and the recent Z16 programs. We did the same thing with our WASI dev test in IBM Cloud, or ZOS dev test in IBM Cloud. And I have to tell you, Mitch, we got so much interest that we had to stop the sponsor user program because we just couldn't take any more users to test out these capabilities. So we know we're hitting a nerve and a pinch point for our clients. And I really think this next set of capabilities is going to really unleash the next innovation, or usher the next innovation on the Z System platform.
It's truly amazing. I think just from my own perspective, the last 3 to 5 years, how much transformation has happened in the Z space, in the DevOps and tooling, and really bringing it from what we thought of maybe more traditional mainframe development, Z platform development, into Linux, and then into DevOps tools, DevOps processes, open source you mentioned, and now adding a true cloud capability to that whole kind of development process. Makes it just as kind of an equal player in all ways as part of developing software. Because I know from my own perspective, you might be working on a new app, you might be working on an existing app, but those things always talk to each other and they have interdependencies between each other. And now we really truly have the capability to meet the demands and acceleration of the business.
No, I agree, Mitch. And when you think of when we think about the ZOS Dev Test in cloud, it's really a complementary capabilities of what our clients today have in our on-prem environment. So when we talk about hybrid, right, it's really connecting both the worlds. I've also seen, Mitch, where the narrative has shifted, just moving everything to cloud. The clients are realizing there are certain workloads that are good for cloud. There's certain workloads that are good for their on-prem environment. There are certain workloads they want in this hybrid world, right? So they can get the best and the optimization of the both worlds. So for example, as I said, we've been in the last 4 years on this journey to enable modern DevOps tooling in our on-prem environment. And we have seen the results of that. Now we are enabling the same stack, same PaaS layer into IBM Cloud. So from a client perspective, what they are used to running in on-prem, all the modern DevOps tooling, is the same tooling now they can run in IBM Cloud. The benefit is the agility they get from the optimization of the infrastructure, where they don't have to now think about infrastructure and how to manage it, how to create it, how to set it up. We will kind of take care of all those responsibilities. And from a hybrid perspective, it's a very complementary thing where, for this ZOS dev test environment, from a use cases perspective, you can think about, early dev testing for flexibility, independence, the way developer works, right? They don't have to wait for this sysprox to give them the infrastructure. You can think about some early infrastructure testing. For example, think about all the malicious things that are happening in the world, and so many software patches, fixes, upgrades our customers have to go do. Now they can quickly do an early testing in those ZOS Dev Test Cloud environment. Think about from an education and skills perspective, Mitch, right? One of the key things for our platform is to bring the next generation of developers on the platform, give them all the toolings they need and know. Now from their perspective, is Z platform development testing is no different than any other cloud development testing. Think about the innovation we can unleash for the platform, right? Usually the curve of innovation on the platform can be a little bit slow because of the criticality of the workloads our customers are running on the platform. So they're very cognizant in terms of how they bring other new innovative things on the platform. Now think about, they can decouple those kind of things, right? And do some sort of early innovative work and development and testing in cloud environments. And from a technology perspective, Mitch, as I said, is fascinating, right? Less than 6 minutes to bring a VSI, a virtual server instance for dev tests. Today we have products like ZD&T that provides x86 alternatives. This WASI dev test, ZOS dev test, now in IBM Cloud is running on real Z hardware, and the performance to existing solution is almost 15x better. So it is a game-changing capability and technology we're bringing in the market.
I was just going to say, my kids would say this is a game changer.
Yeah, it is. And as I said, from the feedback we are receiving, Mitch, it is truly a game changer. And I truly think, and we truly think collectively, that this is going to unleash the next level of innovation for the platform, and most importantly for our clients. That's the most important thing for us.
So talk a little bit, you mentioned WASI, WASI as a service, how that fits into this strategy and in your announcement.
Yeah, exactly. And our goal is to make sure, from a strategy perspective, number one, help our clients get the best out of the investments they have done on the platform.
Mm-hmm.
Second, to achieve that goal, they have to modernize. We have to help them modernize the applications on the platform. DevOps is a key strategic pillar to implementing that strategy. We have a modern DevOps stack available today to run for our clients, of which a lot of our clients are using it, getting the value out of the platform. Where WASI as a service fits in now, Mitch, excellent question, is it's extending that capability, extending that value proposition for our clients that today exists in an on-prem environment, and bring that to IBM Cloud as well, in a true as a service fashion, where depending on the use cases, depending on the nature of the work they are doing, our customers are doing, they can pick and choose cloud, they can pick and choose their on-prem environment, or they can do it on both places, because the technology stack, the experience is the same from a software and DevOps sort of capability. So it's truly about providing customers the flexibility they need. It's also about giving customers the options depending on their choice where they want to go run. But most importantly for us, is really giving their developers the flexibility and freedom to innovate without being constrained through the existing paradigm that a customer might have established in their environment. So for us, WASI as a service is a critical piece of that whole modernization strategy, and extending it and providing the flexibility to our clients through a cloud consumption, a pure as a service consumption model as well.
I'd love to hear you say a little bit more about, I think the thinking around app and modernization, replacement versus modernization has really shifted. What changes have happened there?
I think the changes is clients have realized, right? It's not that easy to rip and replace. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of dollars. It takes a lot of very intelligent human resource capital to do work where they can apply that capital to new innovative projects, to new innovative business models. So, and also to the fact that they have also realized that IBM has started to provide a lot of these capabilities on the platform. A lot of proof points are coming around, right? So customers are getting smart about it, right? To say, hey, the answer is not just cloud. The answer is just not rip and replace. The answer is, how can I get the best out of both worlds? And what I mean by that, depending on the workload characteristics, if it needs to run in cloud, runs in cloud. If it needs to run on-prem, runs on on-prem. If it needs to run or exist in both paradigms, then IBM is the place where we can provide that glue for our customers. So it's really, I will say, Mitch, customer-driven, where through experimentation, through their work, they have realized it's like they have a golden nugget sitting in their own environment, and it's better to just nurture it, water it, help it grow, because by doing that, they can get the best value.
Yeah, I think I would expect we'll see kind of what we've seen in our app development environment today. Once you kind of open up the infrastructure and make that dynamic, and developer says, I need to spin up an environment that looks like this, this, and this, and do whatever dev test or whatever I'm doing. That really opens up what they can do, how quickly they can do it, and kind of work today, tomorrow, whatever's on their work plan.
Great point. And the most important, as they see, look, it's no different to develop on the mainframe platform than any other platform.
Right.
That's where they get the efficiency of their broader development team. Right. Mm-hmm. So they don't have to have a siloed Z system or mainframe team and a distributed team and a cloud team. They have a pool of developers and creators and they use a common set of tools and capabilities to go build applications and workloads wherever they deem fit. So once they realize, oh my God, I can just unleash them on whichever platform I can, then it's game changing for them, right? And the capabilities like containerizations further enhance that thing where they can build one, deploy multiple times on different platform, right? That's the holy grail our customers are looking for, right? How can they get the best out of their innovative teams and not have these siloed where I have a cloud team, I have a distributed team, I have an on-prem team. They want just one team where, depending on their needs, they can unleash them to wherever they go. And our strategy is really, Mitch, to enable that common set of toolings and experiences so that we take away that kind of a FUD out in the marketplace, right? The mainframe is different, mainframe is silo. And as I said, our results are speaking to it. That strategy is resonating and is getting executed. And we have a lot of good proof points in the marketplace that our customers have themselves talked about and how they have benefited from the strategy.
It does. It seems like it just kind of opens up the world of what you can do. We already had a big world already, but now really to the whole platform.
It does. We have, with this validated service, we have taken a next big, I will say, giant step in removing the roadblocks, some of the common roadblocks to the modernization, but also opening up the platform to a much bigger audience, bigger, and also changing the perceptions. When clients, the C-suite, the leaders see that kind of innovation on the platform, I have seen the eyes lit up, right? I have seen, oh my God, I didn't know IBM is doing this with the Z system and the mainframe platform. So that's very exciting.
Achieving more kind of a parity of what we can do across our technology portfolio and applications.
Most definitely.
Very exciting. Well, congratulations. Where can folks find out more? Where can they sign up to be part of this? How can they get involved?
Yeah, that's a great question. As I said, for us, this service is like any other service going to IBM Cloud and provisioning it. I think we're going to have a link in there where clients can go and start playing and testing these capabilities out. Think about that's the beauty of it. They don't have to worry about getting a system or anything. Yeah. After this, watching this video, they can go click the links and go hammer it away.
Let the innovation begin.
Yep.
All right.
Most definitely.
Taryn, congratulations. It is very exciting. I'm so happy to see just a succession of great things happening.
No, this is great. Our teams are very excited in terms of what the customers can do with this capability. So thank you so much for the forum.
I think it opens up so many possibilities. So congrats, Taryn Chopra. Thank you for being with us, and welcome back. Let's talk some more about this.
Thank you. Thank you, Mitch.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond, CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
All right, some great interviews today. A lot of security RSA information there. Hey, before we sign out, I want to remind you about Techstrong DevOps Connect DevSecOps, July 12th. It is the replay of all of our DevSecOps sessions from RSA. Not these interviews, but really great sessions. Go check it out at techstrongevents.com. Hope to see you there. Until then, though, we will not be on the air tomorrow, as usual, Friday, and we will not be on next Monday or Tuesday due to the July 4th holiday weekend here in the U.S. So we'll be back next Thursday with lots of great, fresh content. Until then, though, be well, be strong, be Techstrong.